The working day has ended. Everyone diverged home, and the 20-year Akwogi, tired and thoughtful, slowly crossed the road. At this point, he thought that it was not necessary to return to his native village. Suddenly, a reservation came from the crowd. Someone exclaimed to be more careful. Just a truck flew before the hero. People around shouted and asked him to retreat, but Annika realized what was too late. Alfred immediately realized that his wife's wife was standing in front of him. "Leonore," he said gently, sitting on the grass and rubbing his eye. The guy briefly explained that he had just dozed. Leonore wondered if she was hurting him. Alfred was only 3 years old, and Leonore has been 9. Alfred replied that the eyes were sore through a dream. The girl jumped dissatisfied and put her hands on her chest. She asked if her mother had already brought him out for a walk, and then she wanted to say something else, but only looked at her brother, silent. Leonore looked at the house and asked if everything was fine. Alfred also turned his gaze to the other way. Leonore took him by her hand and said that it was time to go because my mother was already worried. Alfred quietly apologized. The sister looked at him carefully and said that he looked tired. She asked if he was fine, because he was only 3 years old, and he looks like an adult who was already completely exhausted. Alfred sighed quietly in his thoughts. He was really exhausted because he worked as a clerk in his past life. Suddenly, the boy thought that he had previously used educational magic. After applying magic, Alfred felt severe fatigue. He decided to rest a little, believing that it would help restore strength. When his gaze fell on his own hand, he remembered the advice of Leonora. Sometimes it is necessary to train the body, not just to rely on magic. The girl smiled and explained that she did so from the best intentions. Alfred looked at her silently. His face was surprised. "You're a real demon," he muttered. Leonore did not pay attention to it, only pointed her hand to the house and ordered to hurry. There is really magic in this world. God, who could not be given the age, said it was not the earth at all. He told Anaxiyuju that he died in his native world, and after his death, according to the laws of the earth, there are many different things. God turned to Anaka July and told him the unexpected news. His soul accidentally found himself in a foreign world. God himself has not seen it. Back home will not work. The hero bowed quietly, trying to understand what he heard. God explained that instead the hero will receive a new life in another world. This message was a real shock for him. Anaka wondered if he really wanted to stay in this world where there are so many monsters and dangers. Suddenly, God touched his forehead lightly and said that he should not worry. It surprised Anak. Can God really read his thoughts? God confirmed that he is really the God of this world. In this world, people are very similar to people from the earth, but among them are demons that attack people. There is almost no science here, but everything is built on magic. The hero whispered in surprise, "Magic!" Anaka thought that if the rebirth really existed, he would have chosen a simple and peaceful life. However, is it possible to find peace in the world where magic and unusual miracles prevail? With these thoughts, he remembered his previous life. God promised to give him an unusual, special gift. Since he was the first stranger on these lands, he was really unique from birth. Annika was surprised and asked what God meant. Annika only nodded his head. It seemed that even after his death he had no choice. God sadly accepted this. It is impossible to avoid this. The hero was happy and decided to accept everything that happened with an open heart. He began to dream of a happy future in the new world. God did not hide his surprise. So quickly the hero used to change that he even called him carefree. Anaka asked who he would be in the next life. God said that he has a chance to be born a crown or son of a noble family. Anaka thought for a short time and decided to choose life in the body of a child. God supported his choice and promised to fulfill this desire. Before goodbye, the hero expressed his gratitude to God. God noticed that the young man had no dreams or desires, so he decided to give him another power, the opportunity to own ancient magic. Anaka could not believe his ears and asked stunned whether he was allowed to possess magic. God confirmed with a smile that in this world it is quite possible. If you wish, let it rejoice. He was engulfed by incredible joy. He imagined how he climbed into the sky, commanded powerful monsters, and made magic. Everything seemed possible. But here, he stopped, remembering that even the strongest monsters are not able to solve all the problems. The hero wondered if there would be something like a village here. God put one hand on his shoulder, touched the other to his forehead. From this, the hero's eyes flashed, and he realized, to find out the answer, you need to wait a little. Anaka was moved to the clouds, thinking about what power he wanted to get. It was difficult for him to choose. The mighty magic attracted, and the ability to heal, and the desire to protect himself did not rest. But the desire to relax became stronger. He sought not power, but silence and peace. Perhaps this was his true chance to take advantage of magic. Anaka decided to stay in the village and become the son of a local lord. But immediately he thought, what difficulties can arise, and will he be able to handle them? Then God explained that the development of culture in Acolia is similar to the Middle Ages. The hero noted that local society is still quite backward. There is almost no transport. There are neither bicycles nor cars. Then he wondered if he could travel with magic. Raising, the hero decided to turn to God. God wondered what he stopped for. God easily waved a staff and explained that this magic would be beautiful in rural life. He then asked if Inaka was ready for his new world. The hero confidently replied that he was ready. Inka sincerely thanked God for everything. God smiled and said that it is not necessary to thank. It's time to say goodbye. A strong whirlwind swirled around the hero. Inka has not yet had time to realize what was happening. Everything was wonderful. In Yuga Inak, a quiet and peaceful life in the village was waiting. So he began his new life in a completely different world. The hero opened his eyes and saw that he became a baby. The bright light prevailed around. In the kingdom, Midfield had a small village named Polylate. Here lived a 3-year-old boy, Alfred Lovelight, the second son of a local feudal lord. Alfred believed that walking on its own was a great achievement, even if sometimes he could still fall. He remembered what he was in his past life, a 27-year-old man named Inak Yuga. He once worked as a regular office worker who died in an accident. He remembers the moment when a truck raced. Thanks to God's help, he received a second chance and was in the world where magic was genuine. The Lovelay family included dad, mom, older sister, and brother. Although Alfred's body remained baby, his mind was already an adult. Every day, when he was talking around, he learned to understand and speak the language of this world, step by step. His memories of the past helped to learn how to crawl and roll over faster. Mom looked at her baby with delight, but he was powerless because he had not yet learned to walk. Even the book could only be read when it was allowed by adults. He was very fond of reading books about magic, and apparently adults seemed a strange trick. However, in bed he could not work out real spells. He remembered how his mother opened the window and noted that a nice wind would blow today. The baby in response only quietly stuck. Alfred went to the library, hoping to read a new section of the book. Suddenly he heard someone greeted to him. Silvio noted that Alfred has grabbed a new very quickly, and added that you can always ask the question if something remains unclear. Alfred thanked him in his thoughts, wondering his peace and maturity. For his 6 years, Silvio seemed an extraordinary child. He seemed older than his sister Alina, though he was in fact younger. Alina often led her brother with her to work out. Alfred took a book that he had planned to read. Silvio seemed to him a calm and kind person, and it was very impressed by Alfred. The hero looked out the window and noticed that there was wonderful weather on the street. He thought that after lunch could be visited by a secret base. He said the spell of teleport loudly, and a small pebble flew into the air. The pebble disappeared from his hand and suddenly found himself on the table in the yard. Alfred rejoiced in this. He tried many times, throwing stones, twigs, stems. His attempts managed every time. It seemed like a real miracle. In his thoughts, he sincerely thanked God. Alfred felt fatigue even after teleporting the boot. All things were already lying on the table. He could now control magic. The hero shouted in surprise why God was here. God coiled quietly and explained that it was just a dream. He apologized for breaking into his dream and reported that the hero was successfully born. God asked Alfred if he was happy and expressed his hope that the guy would be engaged in spatial magic. Hearing this, Alfred remembered his mother, but ancient magic demanded an incredibly much effort. God confessed to Alfred that he has not enough energy to use even the simplest of these charms. It was very angry with the hero. God quickly reassured him. In fact, everything is not so scary. He promised to show a way to enhance the magical power. The hero sighed with relief. But why didn't they say it right away? He remembered how he had completely devoted himself to magic from his childhood. This lesson truly fascinated him. The hero realized that with such force, he would no longer have to worry about cleaning or wearing heavy things. And even more, he was glad. because it would be easier to run away from his older sister now. Alfred Lottie slightly, realizing that he was partially guilty of all this. Leaving the house, the guy noticed his shoe flew over his head. It looks like it is time to study spatial magic. He approached a large stone and examined it carefully. It seemed that he needed. The guy tried to lift this stone with his hands, but no matter how hard, the stone was too heavy. Alfred decided to try again. Now everything happened. Without spending time, he quit the stone and quickly said the spell for teleportation. At one point, the stone was already lying on the table. It was a real success. Everything is logical. The larger or heavier the object, the more man you need to spend. This rule became quite clear. The hero wanted to test his magic on live creation. He looked around and saw a beetle that was past the tree trunk. I carefully took the insect to my hands. At first it seemed to me that I was a beetle rhino beetle, but quickly understood. This is a completely different kind. I decided to call him Willow Beetle and announced that he would become the first living participant in my magical experiment. The beetle flew into the air, and when a charming spell sounded, it suddenly dissolved and emerged right above the table. Alfred quickly caught him without hiding the delight and praise. It was at this moment that something suddenly hit the head. I turned and saw another beetle that resembled a spoon. I tried to teleport a plate, but nothing happened. It was difficult to control its forces. The plate hung in the air for a short time, and then screwed on the floor. Dafa strokes were heard from the wall. Just 2 months ago, he was first able to teleport a thing. It was from that time that he began to understand how this ability works. Al sat on the windowsill holding a plate. Suddenly the plate disappeared and found itself on the table. Now he tried to force her to return to him again, but nothing happened. He realized that only the things he touched can move. It is impossible to teleport only part of an object or a person, so something will not work out in this way. He very much wanted to try it on real people, but understood that first they needed to get their consent. Turned the plate back using teleportation. Alina suddenly ran into the room and called her brother named. He barely restrained the saucer in his hands not to miss. She quickly asked if he was able to do something cold, because there was heat outside. Meant ice. Alfred was angry and quit that she could at least knock. Alina just shrugged. They say, nothing wrong happened. Alfred advised her to forget about the door next time. She nodded and agreed. But he still did not believe her. Why did you hit me? He asked indignantly. Alina immediately assumed that he had started something again. Al reminded her that he was still very small, her 3-year-old brother. Then she wondered in surprise where he came from such a complex word as irrational. Al realized that he had published himself, and hurriedly replied that he had read it in the book. Alina did not even try to listen to explanations. She wanted only ice. Raising the plate, she repeated in one word. Ice. Alfred only sighed, realizing that it is difficult to be her brother. Then he created a cube of ice that gently fell on her saucer. In this world, ice was considered the best manifestation of water magic. Especially in hot climates, every sip of coolness was in weight of gold. Alfred trained hard. It was not easy, but he gradually succeeded. Alina looked upset. It was not the ice she was waiting. Al was asked in surprise, "Did you talk about him, right?" Alina explained that last time the ice was crunchy and soft. "Do you mean the one that looks like crushed?" he said. The girl nodded in response and smiled gently. Alfred proudly told that he has many skills, and in order to really be called a blacksmith, one should at least understand how it is created. They approached the table on which the saucer stood. Alfred realized that he had no other way out and had to be spell. Suddenly, small ice floes were circling in the air, and Alina could not hold back. The plates have already appeared small ice. Alfred announced that everything was ready and boasted that he had brought a spoon. Alina said with a smile that her brother always cares about everything. She rejoiced in this moment, and Al was already thinking how to use spoons for teleporting exercises. Al scored some ice and approached Silvio. Alina, meanwhile, comfortably settled on the couch and started eating ice. She happily said that the ice is crisp and very cold. Then Al wondered if she knew how to make ice even more delicious and suggested sharing the secret. He smiled treacherously and said that it was better to take a big spoon. This taste is much brighter. Alina approached him, going to note that it was in vain. But Alfred did not let her agree on. He explained that this is just a way to make the taste better, and if it is not sure, he can try herself. Alina agreed. If the taste does not change, Alfred will have to treat it with another portion. Alfred promised. He will prepare as much ice for her as she wants. After that, he went. and Alina began to eat quickly. Due to the cold, her face twisted in a funny grimace. Alina screamed. It seemed to her to have an icy knife in her head. Alfred ran out, and laughing, said it was a revenge for that slap. Alfred came to the library and gave Silvio his portion of ice. He watched with interest how Silvio was happy to eat. Bartolo was nearby, cook and servant, who reported that he had returned again today. Bartolo was both a cook and a servant. Alfred once asked him to allow him to work a little in the kitchen. It surprised Bartolo. He did not expect Alfred here not only for the sake of goodies. Alfred explained that this time he wants to cook some dish. "Do you generally know how to cook?" Bartolo asked. Alfred recalled the times when he lived in Japan himself, and confidently replied that so. Bartolo looked at him with curiosity and narrowed his eyes a little. Alfred squeezed his fists and agreed firmly. Bartolo for a moment. The chef was silent and then agreed, because he saw that Al is serious. He warned the guy not to go far because he does not want something to happen to the child. After that, the chef asked the Alpha which dish he wanted to cook. Al replied that spaghetti wanted and wondered if they could be cooked. Bartolo asked him in surprise. Al, meanwhile, he imagined Japanese rice, watching the ice cubes. The hero said that wheat can be the main food, and spaghetti can come up with many different dishes. Bartolo became interested in this idea. It was really interesting. He immediately suggested that you quickly collect all the necessary ingredients. Alfred stirred the ingredients while Bartolo stood. Instead of parchment, the guy used the leaves he prepared. Then they went to the garden together to break fresh tomatoes. Al went to roll the dough into thin strips, and the chef watched carefully at his every movement. The dish was finally cooked. Bartolo with a smile noted that such deliciousness can strongly cut young people. Alina was dissatisfied in response. They say, it is definitely not related to women's strength. Al thought that competing with her is a completely different kind of magic. The chef sighed, because the first impression was good, but he wanted more sophistication in serving the dish. And the main thing now is the taste. Al tied the apron and prepared to tasting. He first tasted the dish. It was delicious, especially like the sauce that Bartolo prepared. It fits the paste perfectly. Alfred looked at the cook, waiting for his reaction. Bartolo bit a piece and exclaimed joyfully, "It's delicious." He then solemnly addressed Alfred and stated, "Mr. Alfredi, in 3 to 4 days I will prepare a paste that will be even better than this." Hearing this, Alfred was agitated. Al asked to be called as before, and promised to visit the kitchen more often. Bartolo was very happy. 3 days later, a real spaghetti man began in the Lovelay family. Alfred decided for himself. Now his new goal is to diversify the family menu. Alina trained with Silvio. She was stronger than the boy. Alfred watched carefully how Alina was trying. The brother of Silvio stood on the opposite side, and a little later the family joined them. Al mentioned that Silvio did not like to do fencing. The guy believed that it was necessary to defend himself because it was of great importance. In fact, Silvio was most fond of reading and learning. Al felt respect because he believed that it was also a manifestation of strength. The mother sat down and asked if he wanted to work with his sword. But Al said he came just to look, because for him the best is when peace prevails. Mom laughed and asked if he loved a peaceful life. Alfred was a little confused and remembered that he sometimes behaved like a grandfather. Mom remembered that he was more fond of magic with a baby than a weapon. Al that he confirmed. After every book read immediately the running to train. Mom smiled back. Alina called her brother. The workout is over, so it's time for games. Alfred only glanced dissatisfied. Mom smiled and said that his sister was just a real fellow. Subsequently, they were near the river. Alina asked what she would do next. Al took several pebbles and began to throw them into the water, but his little hands did not allow them to be felt far away. Meanwhile, the sister has already come up with some new fun. Al used magic to make his hands stronger. He threw a stone, and he flew very far. Alina opened her eyes with surprise. "Wow," said Al joyfully when his stone jumped on the water 8 times. Leonora looked with surprise and asked how he managed to do so. She grabbed her brother by her shoulders. Her eyes glowed with grip. "It's so cool, teach me too," she exclaimed happily. Alfred immediately asked if she was referring to the art of throwing stones. Al escaped from her arms and said that first of all it was necessary to find a flat stone. He then showed how to throw it properly. Alina listened carefully and nodded in agreement. She threw the pebbles once after, but they just fell into the water with a plunger. "Why don't they jump?" she laughed. Alfred saw that she really liked it. He stretched her stone, a thin and flat, as if designed. She nodded. "Logically." And I decided to try again. Alina strained her hands, focused, and prepared to make a throw. Alfred thought that any surprises could be expected from his sister, because her speed and reaction were really surprised. After that, he began to think, and suddenly fish in that river. Alfred walked along the river, admiring its beauty near the village of Koliat. The water here was so clean that it seemed glass. Suddenly, Alina asked him, asking why he is here. Al began to justify as if Alina had already finished throwing arrows. He quickly offered to try to pour fish. Alina asked, but Al felt she should act faster, otherwise she would propose to go swimming. His sister was strong and unpredictable, and always ahead of him. Even if it was teleported to a long distance, it found it equally. One day he hid in a cave. Alina quickly found him. She was told by intuition where to look. Then Ali thought, "She's really a man?" Alina thought of fishing, but decided it was too boring. Al did not agree at once. He argued that it was a very noble activity, just Alina did not understand it. He joked, calling her a child, and then remembered that he was also small. Alina rushed at the fishing rods, shouting that she would bring everything now. Al was surprised, because she agreed so quickly. He was wondering if she thinks about someone but herself. Al mentioned that he needed to run into the pantry for salt. He opened the door, but instead found a man there. He looked at Alia and said, "I finally caught you." Before them stood Bartolo with a jar in his hands. Al came quietly behind and asked what he was doing. Bartolo suddenly was scared, and the bank almost slipped out of his hands. He had time to grab her in time. When he noticed Alfred, he asked no more to frighten him. Alfred denied, saying that it was not his fault, and wondered that he was in the bank. Bartolo explained that it was the sugar that a long-standing friend sent it. At that moment, a maid Sarah came to the room. She asked what they were doing here. Bartolo thought, "Just not Sarah. Anyone, not she." He began to justify himself, and when Al wanted to say something, the chef quickly covered his mouth with his hand. Al realized that it was necessary to intervene. He called Sarah and told her that he was looking for fishing rods. Sarah explained that Ms. Alina had already taken them with her, and the mine helps her carry. Al quickly took the plate that lay behind and moved it mentally. Sarah looked at a confusion. She felt something strange. Al returned to Bartolo and said that the bank should be hidden urgently. And he added that now the cook is to blame. He will have to share sugar. Bartolo sighed deeply, but he agreed. Taking a little salt, Al went back to the river. Fishing competitions have already ended there, and Alina won. But Al thought that the victory was not quite honest. I decided that it was necessary to deal with the story of Bartolini's sugar later. Meanwhile, Alina convinced that sugar was hidden somewhere here. Bartolo tried to reassure her. However, Al was not worried at all, because he had a spatial hiding place. He lay under a tree and felt a light summer breeze. The weather was wonderful again, and it brought him joy. The air remained fresh, even despite the hot weather. Al mentioned that in Japan the summer heat was completely unbearable. He thought that life in the village was true happiness. Bartolo came to him unnoticed, and asked why Al was smiling so strangely. Al was scared. He sat down, and immediately recognized Bartolo. He sighed hard, rejoicing that he was still alive after an adventure with sugar. Al remembered how he saw a crime scene, where Bartolo tried to hide sugar. They escaped from the demonic girl, and decided to secretly celebrate it, treating themselves with pancakes. Al was very fond of sweets, but the celebration was praised. The maids quickly revealed all the secrets. One of them said she felt a sweet aroma. Another wondered why they were not invited. The third mentioned that there was no sugar at all. Bartolo experienced a real female revenge. Al too, his mother and his older sister arranged a good pilgrim. Al asked Bartolo to give a little more sugar, but Bartolo suddenly got angry, picked up the boy under his armpit and carried him away. It was at this moment that my mother called them because she heard the word sugar. Mom really heard this word, and a mine who works as a maid confirmed that it was a sugar. Alfred wondered if there was something left. Bartolo nodded in response. There was a little more. Alfred was happy, because he had so many ideas he wanted to cook. Bartolo thoughtfully said that it was interesting to know what would happen next. Al noticed that the cook was truly interested in history. Alfred was bored, and he didn't know what to do. He thought he could read the book, but at that moment he was called by his mother. I know nothing about this place at all, said Al. Mom looked at him in surprise, and then explained that she wanted to show him one magical focus. She always said that she would teach him all the mysteries of magic, as she once promised. Al agreed, because today he is not even trained. The day seemed clear and sunny. Mom wondered what magic he was going to use. The test showed that his abilities are related to the elements of water and earth. Al agreed with this and said that he also trains 8 different types of magic, including spatial. Mom asked if he could demonstrate something. She said it could be any spell. Alfred agreed, nodded, and began to create magic. Suddenly a chair grew from the ground. Alfred said everything was already prepared. Mom frozen at surprise. "Where's your spell?" she asked. Al replied that he learned to speak his mentally since childhood. Mom nodded, understanding him. "Show me something else," she asked quietly. Al with a smile nodded and began to spell again. Suddenly, the earth cracked and glasses came out of it. Just in the air there was an icy mass that instantly filled the dishes with cold cubes. Alfred calmly lifted both glasses. The whirlwind, created by magic, dispelled without a trace. Mom did not believe what she saw in front of her. Alfred came closer and stretched his mother. He confessed that he has often used such spells lately. Mom thanked him and noted that he could control 4 elements, including ice. Mom said Al was a real charming talent. She confessed that she couldn't teach him more, even if she wanted very much. Now they need to think about a new training program. Mom also stressed how proud of her son. Subsequently, my mother, along with Alfred, went to their father. The father wondered if Alfred wanted to join the magic school. Alfred calmly replied that he did not want to, because he dreams of being a child. In Lord's estate, someone wondered if all the preparations were completed. They answered that everything is ready and there is no reason. The father agreed with Alev and reminded that when the son of the feudal lord is 4 years old, he should go through the village. This is a long-standing tradition. He wondered if Al knew Al. Al replied that my mother had already told everything and explained to him. The village was quite close, only 10 minutes on foot. The forest in which they threw the stones was to the right of the estate, and the lawn to the left. Al realized that he needs to imagine a place for teleportation. So, when he visits the village, he will be able to instantly be transferred there at any time. Mountains rose on the horizon. They stretched out where they do not throw an eye. Al more than once he repeated this word for himself, as if trying to grasp what he saw. All the earth was covered with thick green grass like a soft carpet, and the trail stretched wide and comfortable. This filled his heart with joy. Alfred felt a spicy scent of fresh herbs and dampness of the earth in the air. It was this special atmosphere of the village that attracted it so much. The father looked at his son in surprise without waiting for such a delight. A week later, the guy returned to the forge, where he was already waiting for a new frying pan. Alfred sincerely thanked Logan for his job. Al remembered the story of Fig. He recently read that a similar plant was growing somewhere on the eastern continent. In some book it was even written about this famous cereal, but the hero in the book did not explain what the taste was. Al was upset, even angry, and threw a book on the floor. It was called Adventures in Dumfries. Al loudly asked why the hero never shared his stories about rice. At this point, his father called him. The village was visible through the window. Al wondered what plants are grown on this earth. Dad said that wheat, barley, rye, beans are sown here, and different vegetables. To all, they hold chickens, sheep, and even cows. Al looked at the wonderful landscapes around. When the Lord appeared on the field, the peasants noticed him and called him happily. They were sincerely happy about his arrival. One of the peasants admired the spaghetti recipe. They were so delicious that it was impossible to stop while eating. Al thought about what these peasants are ordinary and candid people. And his father was happy, and said he was pleased to hear that. "Yes," Lord agreed. "True, my son is still the weirdo." Alfred raised his eyes to the sky with annoyance. The father said it was time for them to go on, to continue the review. The peasants were kindly assured that they could return when they want. One of the men gently patted Alfred on the head. They say, "You grow up as your father." On this, Alfred jokingly noted that a man would not be distracted by his wife while working. The man was embarrassed and blushed. "How do you know?" he exclaimed. Al realized that he got to the very point. The second peasant only sighed, realizing that he was too late to change something, and he answered so calmly and seriously. "You really only 4 years?" The peasant was surprised. At this point, the father with his son had already reached the village. They came to the market where life raged around. People offered vegetables and simple dishes, calling for buyers. Alfred noticed that they are trading not for money here, but mostly change one product to another. The guy noticed bright, multicolored mushrooms. It seemed to him that they looked suspicious and could be poisonous. Sellers are also located on the square near the fountain. Al noted that everything was built here on free exchange of goods. It shows that their economy is not very limited. The father nodded, confirming his words. Without such freedom, many peasants would not be able to feed their families. The father explained that barter is possible only when people have enough for life and for exchange. Alfred agreed, because it is quite logical. The elder approached them and greeted Lord. Lord politely responded to greetings. Then the headman suggested that he was faced with a young Lord Alfred, and Lord confirmed his guess. The elder took off his hat and sincerely congratulated the boy, glad that he was healthy. He wondered whether their village likes. Al smiled and said that he was very good here, and all people are fun and friendly. Hearing this, the elder was even more happy. The elder turned to Lord and asked that he was thinking about this year's harvest. Lord replied that the harvest this time came out better than last year, and it was noticeable by the joy of people. The headman found that this year everything was well. The weather was stable, and the rich harvest helped everyone survive winter without loss. Alfred recalled that winter is very cold here. The elder asked Lord to discuss important things and invited him to his home. Lord accepted the invitation. The father asked Alfred that he plans to do next. Alfred said he wanted to get acquainted with the village a little better. The father did not deny, only advised not to go far. Alfred agreed. While the Lord and the elder went to discuss the cases, Alfred made purchases. He selected ingredients, spices, wood, and more. Alfred was delighted with all this lesson. Al used spatial magic to make and get things from his own storage at any time. As time stopped there, the food remained fresh. Al decided that he needed to record what he stores. This magic was very convenient. Alfred thought that every merchant would like to have such power. The father called Al. The guy quickly ran and asked if they had already discussed everything. The father nodded and confirmed. My father asked if Ayla had attracted something. He remembered the merchant who sold multicolored mushrooms. They seemed suspicious, as if poisonous. Hearing this, his father answered nothing and went silently. Lord greeted Syria, mistress of Taverna. She happily said that thanks to the new spaghetti recipe, they had increased visitors. Then Lord introduced her to Alfred. It was he who invented this recipe. Are you Mr. Alfred? Syria asked in surprise. Do you have any other ideas? Al was a little embarrassed and replied that he had still thoughts, but he lacked the right tools and products. Syria advised to turn to the blacksmith Logan. He is stubborn, but a true master of his business. From these words in the eyes of Alfred appeared a fire. The first visit to the village unexpectedly brought him the opportunity to get kitchen tools. Syria promised to negotiate with Logan. Al decided that, with teleport, it would be even more interesting. The guy first decided to spray boards into square pieces, and then make a field of 8 by 8. Then I carefully cut the chips, and finally painted one side in black. A little time passed and the game was complete. Al remembered the saying, "It's easy to learn, but it's hard to become a master." Looking at the playing field, he realized, this game looks simple, but hides the true depth. He was approached by Alina Slolet's eldest sister and immediately asked what he had done. Alfred began to say that in order to pick up someone's chip, you need to place it between your 2 chips. At the end of the game, the one who has the most chips remains. Alina realized what they wanted from her. Alfred suggested that she play, and she gladly agreed. Taking the chip to her hands, Alina promised to paint the whole playing field with her color. Alfred gave Alina the opportunity to start the game. She was a little worried, but at the same time jokingly threatened that she would not be condescending to him. She was really confident in her victory. When the game was over, the girl boldly announced that her chip in the corner is exactly her achievement. However, something went wrong. The chips suddenly became black. Alinora suddenly rose from the table and exclaimed, "How could I lose?" Al calmly announced the score, 56 by 8. The girl lowered her head, and Alfred immediately felt anxious for her. But suddenly she raised her head and admires that this game was incredible, and she wanted to play again. Al gladly agreed. They played 3 more parties, and each time the victory went to Alfred. He even said he could give her the game, but her sister insisted on her own. The day flashed unnoticed. Alfred felt fatigue and suggested dinner. But Eleonora began to ask again a little more. He did not remember how many times he heard this request in a day. A girl with long light hair came into the room. She reported that she had been dinner for almost a time and wondered what they were doing here. Eleonora explained that they play a game, which was also called reverse. "What is the game?" asked the girl. Eleonora said with a smile that it is necessary to grasp the enemy chips with her multicolored chips. "The one who has more chips will win," she explained. The girl wondered if it was allowed to place chips anywhere. Alfred seemed to him that he was already familiar, and this feeling caused him a slight excitement. When the rules became clear, the girl wondered if everyone could play together. Alina gladly agreed to this idea. Valinor, along with a girl named Alina, began to play. They discussed their moves for a long time, and Alina often asked if he was doing everything right. While they were passionate about the game, Alfred left the room unnoticed. Al sat at the table next to Dad and brother. The father put his hands on his chest and asked where Alina and Galina went. Almista explained that the girls still stay in his room. He carefully pushed the chair and said that they would probably not come soon. The brother noted that these words were not quite appropriate. Then the father wondered what happened. Alfred remained silent, so his father decided to send Silvio to find out what was happening in the room. Alfred carefully denied that this was not the best idea. It was impossible to stop Silvio. Al only lowered his head and said quietly that dinner would definitely be later. The father did not even understand what it was about. A few tens of minutes passed, and the head of the family went to the room. He stopped at the door, set his hands on his sides, and asked loudly what they were doing there. Alfred realized that when the game becomes too exciting, people may depend on it. This is a danger. He regretted that he did not think about everything in advance. When the guy stayed himself, he decided to make another set for reverse. He thought that if the dad was playing, he would not see his old board already. Alfred quietly strolled through the street, as suddenly he was noticed by a man with a thick beard. "What did you forget here?" said the stranger. "But just something, master," Alfred replied at ease. Suddenly, the man grabbed him and pressed him. "Heard, you came up with an interesting game," he said, touching Alfred's cheeks lightly. "Now you have to do so for me." "And why do I have something for you?" said Al. Looking at the pantry, Alfred noticed that all the reserves were over. "Now you need to go to the village to replenish the necessary materials." He barely slipped from Alina and ran away, not knowing where. Alina shouted after him, but the guy just wanted to be where it would be a little rest. Eleonora ran to him and suggested going to the lake together. Beautiful weather prevailed outside. However, when she blinked, her brother already should be pierced. He managed to run far forward. Alfred recently hit the gambling trap, and today he came to the village of Koliat again to see the blacksmith with the blacksmith. The peasant told something to her friend, but Alfred did not stop to listen. He quickly ran further, looking for a forest beyond the city. "I went to the house and thought, I wonder if Logan is here now." At the same moment, a metal ring came from behind the building. The house was decorated with various blacksmiths. Inside, the master, with a slight insatiable, worked near the anvil, creating something new. Alfred agreed with Logan. The smithy is not a place for children. Apparently, Logan thinks he came just to have a good time. But Logan does not know that he is not an ordinary boy at all. Syria advised Alfred, "Just the name of her name, and Logan will see him immediately." So it happened. The blacksmith immediately showed interest. Alfred realized that it is sometimes important to keep something about the stock. The man came closer and wondered what he wants. "Al, do you believe me?" asked the guy. "I may not believe, but at least listen," Koval replied. Alfred sincerely acknowledged the name of Syria to convince Logan to help. Hearing this, the Logan said gloomily, "In our village who will do it will have big problems." He also added that all Syria friends are real chunky guys. "They do not cope with it," Koval said. Alfred could not believe his eyes. A moment ago, Logan looked absolutely sure. But it was worth only one word, and it seemed to have changed in his eyes. After a while, they were already sitting in a cozy cafe. Al asked what his specialization was. Logan just smiled and replied that it was better to see with his own eyes once than listening to stories. They carefully inspected the walls, and Logan said that he was engaged in the manufacture of pots, agricultural tools, cutlery, and even swords. However, it specializes most in the kitchen utensils. Alfred wondered if the blacksmith could make a knife and a frying pan. The blacksmith immediately agreed to make a knife. but did not understand why the usual round frying pan did not suit Alfred. Seeing that his pockets were empty, Al invisibly teleported the notepad directly into his hand. He carefully put the object on the table and drew a sketch of the pan. Logan looked at the drawing, thoughtfully ran his chin, and admitted that it would try to make a frying pan with all the little things right now. "How did you like it?" he asked. Alfred nodded in response. "She looked very good and seems to be comfortable to use." "And how will you use it?" Logan asked. Al said he could show right now if he's allowed to use the kitchen and give several products. He asked if they had eggs. The blacksmith replied that there were eggs and there was salt and sugar. Logan turned on the stove and asked Alfred to wait a little. Alfred sat silently, but suddenly noticed the old ruins in the house. This unexpectedly inspired him to a new idea. The guy decided to help the blacksmith to repair the house. There were cracks and other damage everywhere. He used magic, and the wall immediately became flat and strong. Logan exclaimed in surprise, "You are a real box with surprises." He never imagined that such a little child could have magic. Al only shrugged and said that he knew only simple spells, but there is a lot of time, so he would gladly help with repair. "And magic is still needed somewhere?" the blacksmith asked. "Al, as it is really useful, so he is engaged in exercises every day." Logan praised him for such an adult approach. "I am often told," Al smiled and started cooking in a frying pan. Logan approached the boy and wondered if he dreamed of becoming a cook in the future. Alfred confessed that he had not yet decided who would be, but he really likes him. The blacksmith tried the dish and immediately noted that it was very tasty. Alfred was happy because everything came out as he wanted. Logan confessed that he often eats eggs and omelets, but this is the kind, a true work of art. He is sure that this dish should be promoted. Perhaps very soon everyone will want square frying pans. The blacksmith did not hesitate for a second. It is time to start preparation for mass production. Alfred was glad that easily got the kitchenware, but it began to be disturbed by the idea. Did he give rise to a new addiction? Logan had already asked him to prepare an omelet in tavern. Al was aware that it was becoming stronger in the magic of Earth. He remembered how he tried to create a house for the first time. At that time, he had a tight room that resembled the camera. There was a lot of empty land in the village, so Al decided to erect a small country house for itself. He was defeated by his head. He immediately realized that he had ended mana. Recently, everything he did has been very exhausted. Syria remembered both reverse and tamagoyaki, but Al still did not understand anything. Then he said it was better to see everything himself once. "How? Even the reverse tournament?" was surprised Al. The woman nodded and explained that the competition is being held here, just in tavern, and the participants come from different places. Al wondered if they had enough boards. Syria said that Herman tried very hard to be enough. At this point, Herman, noticeably tired, greeted Alfred. The guy felt sorry for Herman. He barely had time to do all the work, especially when all the residents were watching him carefully. Herman himself added that he had time to complete the kits on the eve of the tournament. Syria announced that a special match will be held soon. Alfred will have to fight the winner of the tournament. He became terrible to even think who could become his opponent. "The winner will receive my daughter Carl," Syria said with a smile. Little Carl politely greeted Alfred, not understanding what was happening. Carl and Alfred sat at a separate table, received their kits for the game. Alfred began to worry. All the visitors of the tavern with interest were watching when the game began. Carla shook his hand and said with a smile that she was 12 years old, so she is much older. But she does not plan to concede. Alfred replied that it is also a matter of honor for him, because he is not only the creator of the game, but also the son of the local feudal lord. Carl rose sharply, struck her palms on the table and exclaimed, "How did it happen?" Meanwhile, in the hall, the guests clapped loud in the palm of Alfred, greeting him with a victory. He glowed with pride. "You're really very strong," Carl said with a smile. "But next time the victory will be after me." Al only nodded and replied that he was always ready for another duel. He thought, a real serious girl, all in her mother. Herman gently spent his hand on the head of Charles and suggested that he go to eat something together. Life prevailed in the tavern. Someone ordered Tamagian, and someone just relaxed after a hard day. Alfred noted that the Tamagian people began to order very often. Syria said that thanks to his spaghetti recipes and tamgogis, many new clients come to them every day. She said that because of a large number of guests, they lacked workers and asked Alpha from time to time to help. Alf replied that Bartolo's recipe would be better to show that he could help him. Al fell to the ground and sighed heavily. There was almost no force, and there are many more things. However, he does it all to have a peaceful life. Thinking, Al decided to get home and just relax. He got a sound and woke up in a good mood, full of strength. He decided to chat with Bartolo in the kitchen, but suddenly his idea interrupted the unexpected noise behind the door. He has no ambitions at all. A familiar indignation came nearby. Al immediately recognized the voice of the main maid male, and next to her stood a girl, Mita. Al was surprised to realize that their conversation concerns him. The girls were delighted with Alfred. The boy was already able to use magic in his 4 years, invented spaghetti, tamgoyaki, and the reverse game. They joked with each other and thought with interest that he could come up with an incredible one. One of the girls said that if you add a little sugar to the tamagal, the dish becomes completely different in taste. Everyone around laughed and joked, "But you always think about sweets." Then they wondered where she had such knowledge. The girl, covering her with a smile, confessed that she heard what Alfred and Bartolo was talking about in the kitchen. Hearing this, the guy was immediately angry, how she could do it. Alfred went to Bartolo and greeted him. He immediately asked what Bartolo was working on and why he has so many eggs. Bartolo smiled and explained that he was going to experiment a little, combining different ingredients. Alfred spoke Bartolo how he heard that Mina was discussing with the maids secret ingredients for tamagian. It seems that this secret has already become known. Bartolo became angry so much that he was red with anger. The guy warned everyone more cautious. Bartolo exclaimed that he was now hiding the sugar in the darkest place. Al hastened to remind you that there is little time, and it is necessary to act immediately. The situation was similar to an underground drug lab. Smugglers were preparing to ship their goods. Bartolo nodded, calling everyone to be careful and careful. Suddenly, a girl ran into the kitchen and wondered if the tamgoyers would really be tastier if you add a little sugar. Alfred and Bartolo froze in place, because they have not yet had time to hide white gold. The girl saw the powder that was scattered on the table and asked if it was sugar. Bartolo, frightened, hurried to assure her that it was just salt. She politely apologized to what she asked. The girl still tried that salt to taste, touching her finger. She immediately realized that it was real sugar. Al and Bartolo were so ashamed that they could not even say a single word. She just smiled and said confidently that she was feeling that the sugar should be added more. Bartolo lied to her that there were no stocks in the kitchen. But she noticed his words and immediately guessed, if there was no, then the sugar stayed somewhere. Everything was calm. The quiet wind played gently with the leaves. Peace and comfort prevailed on the streets. In this silence, Alfred called his name. The guy told how he mastered arithmetic, history, and rules of conduct, and at the same time remembered how in the next room Alina was quietly moaning, trying to overcome his largest enemy, mathematics. The girl screamed in confusion that she did not understand anything at all and could not understand how all this happened. Alfred only thought about himself that mathematics was a real devil. Alina ran up and noted that Eleanor quickly mastered the art of fencing. In response, Eleanor said she was dreaming of being the best and is not going to give way to anyone. Alfred in thoughts compared. Silvio's brother seems much stronger and more confident than Eleanor. Silvio manages nothing at all. And that is what Allah causes true envy. While they read together in the open air, Alfred shared with Silvio thought that many girls were interested in. Silvio, ashamed, only waved his hand and replied that it was exaggerated. Alina promised Alfred, if he solved the task, she will not be able to go to the lessons. Hearing this, Alfred blossomed with happiness. That is what he wanted. Alina began to distribute the task among everyone. Alfred got new and very difficult examples that she had never met, and Alina again got the same tasks that she had last week. 5 minutes have passed. Al did he lift the sheet and exclaimed that everything was ready. But as soon as he stood up, as someone suddenly grabbed him by the collar, Sarah grabbed his hand and said that first you needed to check the answers. Al quietly said that he did not even notice how she appeared in the room. Eleanor checked the answers and did not find any mistake. Therefore, Alfred was released from the lesson. From this, Alina covered anger. Her smart brother was again in the center of general attention. The guy walked along the corridor and imagined his thoughts how it would come out into the fresh air. Suddenly, he was met by a father who asked if he completed his classes. They went outside. Al reminded that fencing training was planned today. My father smiled and said that it is never too late to start training. Alfred thought that although he has succeeded in magic, he still needs to exercise with the sword. He remembered the advice of his father. Do not strain your hand. Move it gently and freely. After several blows, the father praised his son for a significant improvement in the technique. The suffocated Al thanked, but I thought, I would not do it better. He became angry because he had to train again. He sighed heavily and muttered quietly that he did not want to go to his day practice. At this time, training duels between Alina and Silvio were required to begin. The father gave a sign, and it all started. Alina immediately ran to her brother, hugged him firmly, and asked what happened. Silvio remained silent and did not answer anything. The guy tried to hit his sister, but suddenly Silvio grabbed his head and began to shout that he was hurt. Alina turned to Alfred and asked if he wanted to join the game. Alfred was angry. He did not want to participate at all. Alfred was glad that peace was dominating, and everyone just enjoy a good day. This was enough for him to feel happy. While he was walking around the house, he thought that he would take the construction of a swing today. But it was at this moment that something unusual attracted his attention. Just in the middle of the room, on the floor of his home, a stranger was ashamed calmly. It was an elderly man. Alfred did not know this person at all. In one eye he had a black bandage, and the whole face was covered with scars. It seemed that the grandfather would not wake up himself. Then Alfred exclaimed loudly, "It's time to have dinner," hoping it will help. The grandfather suddenly jumped and exclaimed, "Who said here about lunch?" Alfred did not expect him to wake up so quickly. The old man was sharply asked who was standing in front of him. Alfred noted that he would not hurt to be polite, because he spent the night in his house. The old man looked around with surprise. He did not even know that he was someone's home. Alfred noted that it is impossible to treat a foreign home lightly. After that, the guy politely called his name, noticing how the old people were interested in home furniture. The man introduced himself with Roomba and smiled, saying that he was glad to meet. Roomba, watching Alfred prepared something, noted that the boy had very cozy at home. Then he noted that the bathroom was not visible here. Alfred wondered if he was ever washed at all, because there was a bad smell in the house. He reached out to the guest a mug. The Roomba thanked and thought that they were exactly what they understood here for hospitality. He did not believe his eyes. In this village in his hands was a drink with ice. After scratching his beard, he remembered that the princess also owned the magic of ice. Then Alfred asked if he arrived from the capital and put a plate of spaghetti before him. Roomba said that a familiar merchant named Trila told him about spaghetti. Alfred immediately remembered this man. He often visited their village. The guy remembered how once he heard that the girl had brought sari sari. It turned out that she found some secret door. Then Alfred was very surprised. The Trila really solved this mystery, and Sari thanked him sincerely for it. After that, the guy asked for a long time before her. Alfred remembered how all the sweets were taken through it for a whole week. He decided that the next time he would definitely express that the merchant thinks. The Roomba wondered what happened, but the guy only replied briefly that everything was fine. One day, when the Roomba did not know where to go further, the Trilam suggested that he visit the village of Koliat. So he went there. Alfred was amazed, because their village rarely visits adventure. It is too distant from the capital. Roomba also confessed that he did not think that the road would be so long. The guy asked what he was planning to do next. Roomba said it was a calm and cozy village, so he wants to live a little here. Alfred asked where Roomba plans to stay. The Roomba replied that it would stay here because there is a kitchen and a bath. Alfred agreed, but with the condition that the Roomba will take care of himself. The old man asked if Alfred was really living here. He explained that it was only his second home, and the main place is elsewhere. The Roomba was very surprised. Such a huge house. And does the child own it? Roomba asked where the main house was located. Alfred replied that it was a lord's estate, which stands near the village. In addition, he said that he is the second son of the Slaughlet family. This name seemed to be mentioned. Alfred said his father was a feudal lord named Nord Slaughlet. Hearing this, the Roomba shouted in surprise that it was a legendary dragon destroyer. Alfred just smiled and noted that this nickname seems funny to him. Roomba confessed that he still remembers what hero he looked at that moment. Alfred in response noted that his father, apparently, did not forget the Roomba. People with such a bright good luck. Al well remembered that his father was once a famous adventure seeker. Dad just did not like to talk about those times because he joined his strange nickname. Suddenly, Roomba grabbed the guy firmly by his hand, and with despair in his voice asked, "Please take me to the estate." He clearly needed help. Alfred recalled Eleanor and imagined how they were with that guy together. This thought scared him. They were sitting in the room of the estate, and the old man looked at each corner carefully. Alfred sighed heavily. I still had to bring him here, because in the eyes of the old man so much pity that it would be impossible to refuse. In addition, the old man would hardly let him go. Alfred's mother entered the room with a sincere smile and asked lively, "Well, who came to us?" Suddenly, Roomba jumped, showed his finger on his mother Alfred, and exclaimed, "But this is the same sorceress who fell in love with the Nord!" At first, the woman did not immediately realize what had happened, and Alfred was very concerned about her mother. But suddenly, she was thinking of memories. She remembered Roomba. Her cheeks immediately flashed with a blush, and she grabbed her faces, hiding him. Roomba laughed, realizing that Alina recognized him. Mom said that such a man could not be forgotten, but Alfred looked at her and could not recognize. She has never been to the way he was right before. He guessed that, perhaps it was so that she was, even before she received the title and became a lady. She still does not give her more than 30 years. But Roomba suddenly recalled that Alfred is still nearby, and hears it all. Mom leaned to Alfred, thanked the fact that he made her company, and invited her to go to the living room. There you can choose a candy. Alfred smiled. He understood how his mother was trying to stay strong in front of him. The guy noted that when the girl's face is full of worry, she looks especially sweet. And my mother immediately scolded, showing her anxiety. Roomba laughed and patched the Alfred on his head. Alfred glad. He just wanted to see his mother again as before. Alfred walked along the corridor with a smile, imagining how candy with his name could look like. At that moment, he suddenly stopped. A father, who was about to greet the guest, came out. Dad suggested to work together. Talking to the Roomba, he felt the strength and inspiration again, so he wanted to try himself in training. An evil Alfred asked his father whether he seems to be too much today. He mentioned yesterday's joke about the dragon killer, and wondered if it was not about what was happening now. The father ordered him to rise and move on. Alfred understood that Dad was still angry because he was teasing yesterday from his nickname. And suddenly he noticed his mother. She was in sportswear and was very surprised. Alfred blossomed with joy. If Eleanor is now busy with a Roomba, he will finally fall off a free day for himself. But the father did not allow to leave. He said he would now check whether the son is able to dodge the blows. And he warned, if he does not handle, the sword can accidentally get into his head. Alfred also decided to joke a little. Even if he was hitting his head 100 times more times, he will still not forget the nickname Killer of Dragons. The father just smiled back. Silence reigned for a few seconds. Alfred wondered whether their duel was passing. Noticing this, his father asked why he was so suddenly. Only a few seconds passed, and Alfred was already on the ground, and his sword rolled away. He did not even have time to realize what had happened. Just lay on the grass and breathed hard. I closed my eyes and thought, though it did not hurt, but I didn't understand anything. I didn't even notice how my father acted. When the dad approached, Alfred just looked up, admiring today's particularly blue sky. The guy looked around and could not understand what was happening. For a moment he forgot even who he and where he was. But gradually the name came out in memory, Alfred Slolalet. And he also remembered that in his past life was called Akayuji. He remembered how he trained with his father today. He remembered these classes well. They were special for him. When he fell, Alina quickly ran to him. She began to ask him worriedly whether he was fine and did not hurt him. The Roomba did not restrain himself and exclaimed that she stopped so much. The girl confessed that she was very worried. Alfred's eyes seemed completely empty, but Roomba assured her that there was nothing to worry about. Alfred always had such eyes from birth. Alfred wondered where all those worried faces disappeared, which was still before his eyes. I barely opened my eyes and immediately saw the Eleanor argued with a Roomba. She already asked if he wanted a real duel. But suddenly Roomba noted that I came to my senses, and told everyone that now it was possible to exhale with relief. Roomba, triumph after his victory in a duel, said he would take Alfred with him the next day. Eleonora could not withstand. She became angry and burst into tears, because she never managed to hit. The girl clenched the sword in her hand and said loudly that she would never be able to take defeat. Roomba could not hide her astonishment. The girl is still young, and already has a real combat character. However, it became clear to him, because she is the daughter of the same hunter for dragons. The old man saw Alfred asks his father's permission to relax, and realized, Eleanor and her brother are not at all like each other. They are different, like a day and night. Alina shouted to Roomba, asking whether it was so careless to turn away from the enemy. She noted that she could easily attack him just when he was inattentive. She warned, "Do not pay attention to her age, you should not underestimate her." The Roomba in response said he was always treated with those who sincerely try. The girl with irony asked if he really thought she would be able to attack her when he was in that condition. But the guy suggested that she use her agility. This is her main advantage. And to train. Roomba confidently said in a serious tone that he lived in this world twice as long as the others, so his body became strong and hardy. He stressed that simple, ill-advised blows could not injure a true hardened warrior. Eleonora admitted with reluctance that at times he seems really cool to her, and it annoys her. The Roomba, in response, joked as if she had forced him. She lifted her sword and thanked her for help. Now she felt better and was ready for a new battle. Then the Roomba suggested that you put a couple. Who of them the first to strike, he will receive the reward. After that, he turned to Alfred and looked at him thoughtfully. And here he suddenly announced, "The winner will have the opportunity to spend the whole tomorrow with Alfred." Eleonora immediately accepted this proposal without hesitation for a moment. She was defeated, and it was very upset. Roomba served her drink and praised for a worthy struggle. He smiled and gladly informed that tomorrow he would spend the day with Alfred. He wished her the best of all the best, and Eleanor had fun in response that he would certainly win the next time. Meanwhile, Alfred was lying in bed and wondered why everyone was deciding without him. After all, he also has his own opinion. The sister came into the room and said she left delicious food and water on the table. The guy thanked her. She suddenly suggested that if Alfred is too weak, she can feed him from the spoon. But he abruptly refused such assistance. Hearing her sigh, he wondered if everything was fine. Eleonora replied that everything was well with her, and it just seemed to him. He realized about himself. When the girl answers nothing, it really means that something happened. And if she says absolutely nothing, so the matter is really serious. The sister put her hands on his chest and advised him to remain silent and rest. The guy smiled in response, because he spoke only because she was around. Eleonora quietly left the room. The guy enjoyed silence, but suddenly heard his sister mutilated in the hallway, angrily complaining that he wanted to feed him from the spoon. He heard every word of her. Alfred remembered how everyone was worried about him, and it became warm and joyful in his soul, even more pleased with the fact that today he was able to just relax and have nothing to worry. Yesterday he just lay because he had a concussion, and in the morning a Roomba came to him to take a walk. The man urged everyone to get up. He said that if the head is light, it is time to go outside and breathe in the fresh air. The Roomba decided to see the village closer, and therefore appealed to Alfred to hold it around. For Alfred, it was unexpected and a little awkward, but he still agreed to become a guide. He told Roomba that local wheat fields look like warm embrace. They joyfully meet those who come and gently lead on the road. The Roomba sighed deeply and remembered his mother, comparing the field with her. Alfred only smiled kindly. The closer they were approaching the central Colletta Square, the more buildings appeared around, and the building became increasingly denser. In this village there was the following order. Newcomers settled on the outskirts, moving away from the central part. The shops and workshops were placed exactly where people needed. For example, tractors and visiting yards were placed near the city center to be more people. The blacksmiths were erected on the outskirts so that the noise did not bother the residents. But Logan chose to live on the outskirts himself, at his own request. Roomba thought that it was very loud here. He was convinced that if the village was closer to the capital, people would be much more here and would always be crowded. When they passed the store, a young guy came out and greeted Alfred. Alfred answered gladly, and Hermann looked carefully at the giant standing nearby and did not hide his astonishment. Then Alfred explained that this man was familiar with his father. The Roomba looked at local products with delight and exclaimed that he had never seen anything like this. Hermann just smiled and said that he created all this on his own. Then, when the Roomba tried the dish, he was delighted. He said El saved him, because without him he would have died of starvation here. Suddenly stopping, the Roomba remembered how always went with a large stock of food. But this time, everything went out of plan. On the approach to abandoned buildings, he saw several children. He approached the children and asked if they wanted to eat. Sitting nearby, he noticed that the children were looking at him with fear. Roomba confessed to Allah, who gave all his food to the children, because they needed much more than him. Allah was silent and listening carefully. Meanwhile, Roomba showed a blank bag, explaining why he had no food on the road. In the end, he hardly reached the village. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he immediately fell to the ground from fatigue. It was then that El realized why the stranger spent the night in his house. Now the Roomba was happy that he was here and could eat delicious spaghetti. El did not even suspect that the path to the village led through the thick wilds. Thinking, he did not hear the Roomba called him. When they walked past the counter with vegetables, the man said he had felt hunger again, and suggested that Ellie eat together. The guy smiled and agreed. El proposed to go to the series. While they communicated, the Roomba stretched his cherry. El was surprised that Roomba had money, but the stranger got a gold coin and suggested that the boy pay for everything right now. He assured that there was no reason to worry, and suggested that in the series everything is the best. Hearing this, the Roomba was genuinely surprised. How can you earn such money when working in a regular rural canteen? When he came inside, he was impressed with the size of the establishment. El explained that the restaurant had to be expanded due to certain circumstances. He did not want to lose his beloved Tamagotchi at all. El saw Roland, who was sitting at a table with a sad expression. I asked my friends what happened. They replied that nothing had changed. Everything is still. They just had fun in their favorite game when they changed dishes. One of the men with regret said that Roland never learns from his mistakes, just like a Logan in the past. But despite this, it still does not stop the game. The Roomba suddenly noticed under his feet a small stone. El explained that through constant reverse games, even at night, it is always noisy here. The reverse, which appeared in the series, quickly made this establishment popular and helped it grow. It looks like a Roomba is not familiar with this game. He remembered how he had ever shown him something like him. Trilla was engaged in the sale of playwrights, and thanks to this, Ella's family received her percentage of profits, which significantly increased their income. There is also a patent system in this world. Otherwise, artisans would be left without protecting their inventions. One of the players invited the Roomba to play with him in a reverse. When the Roomba understood the rules, a smile appeared on his face. Everything turned out to be quite simple. The player noted his perseverance, and it was really deserved. He suggested that the tamagoyaki dish. El was not surprised at all, because he was accustomed to such bold pranks. But the Roomba did not even imagine that it was for food. The player took the neighbor tamagoyaki and put Roomba on a plate. The neighbor looked a little dissatisfied, but Roland said to accept. They say, "This is quite a trifle." The Roomba did not ceremony. He just took and swallowed everything at once. It was so surprised by the player that he could not even believe his eyes. After tasting the dish, the Roomba exclaimed that it was delicious and asked for more. But Roland replied that first you needed to play the game. Roland assured that if the Roomba wants to play again, let him win first. The Roomba in response joked, suggested that El to take out his opponent and study him. El replied to this that you need to play a reverse here, not solve everything. Roomba gathered with thoughts and took the first few steps, but then he unexpectedly realized that he was nowhere to go. There was no free cells on the board. Roland understood this and, smiling, took defeat. He only had to give up. They were approached by an elderly woman named Sari and said that Roland was coming here every day. There were always many visitors in the establishment, but real life began at night when the series was filled with people. Everyone drank, became noisy, often flared quarrels, and even a series that seemed fragile had to stop the fights. The series did not understand why Al so embarrassed her. He had no idea that there were often quarrels. Even her husband was unlikely to be able to interfere with her. It became funny from this thought. The series gently turned to the Alfred and invited him to take a short time. She did not wait for him to answer, but just took his hand and led her. She struck him lightly on her head and said that if he had enough strength, let the dishes wash. Al realized that there was no point in arguing with her, so he had to agree. Roomba said that the boundary between stupidity and genius is very thin. He noted that he had just learned only one of the 7 riddles of the village. The Roomba wanted to open others immediately, but Roland advised not to rush, because they still have enough time. Roland answered a smile, and the Roomba ordered another wine. At this time, Ali washed the dishes and could not understand why he had to do it. Since the Roomba settled in the village, a week has passed. Al has even introduced an entertainment fee in his recreation center. The hero noted that Roomba Base looks much better than any hotel in this city. The Roomba agreed and said that it was really very cozy here, thanking for the compliment. However, Al did not hide his dissatisfaction. The Roomba stubbornly did not want to move to the estate and, according to Allah, behaved as if he was a helpless princess. Al hesitated whether he did right, leaving Lenore himself. But Roomba assured that he had already talked to the norms. The guy believed that together with Lenore, They could attack from different sides and quickly overcome the enemy. Al really wanted to know how an experienced adventurer actually works, so he decided to go with him into the forest. The Roomba moved easily, and without any unnecessary sound, performing everything clearly and confidently. In addition, the food in his second hiding is almost over. I did not want to expel the Roomba, but maybe it is worth doing at least today. The owl again frightened her prey when she accidentally broke the branch. Al was very surprised how this giant could move so quietly. He almost stepped on the branch, but managed to stop in time. The Roomba did not pay attention to it. He was absorbed by the boar. The guy thought how to learn how to hide so skillfully. But suddenly the Roomba stopped him, putting a huge hand on his shoulder. Al was surprised, and the Roomba warned him. Someone seems to be approaching them. It looks like a goblin. Al could not believe. Are goblins found in these parts? The guy thought that he probably just got lost. The forest around the estate was safer, but if you go on, you could meet the boars and various monsters. The feudal lord had to take care of the safety of their people, protecting them from monsters and robbers. To do this, he could hire adventurers or organize special detachments that were monitored in order. Al noticed a low creature with sharp ears and immediately realized before him a typical goblin, as those he read about in books. The Roomba immediately realized that for the guy, it was the first meeting with the monster. But Al said that he had seen such creatures before, though only from afar. He once came across a white wolf, which everyone was called Wind. Then, he was miraculously lucky to escape. He later learned that his father went with the detachment to kill him. The Roomba laughed and joked that, apparently, his father wanted to study his son for a long time. But Al reminded him that it was the father who heads the local detachment. Then he tried the cooked food, praised and said that she was very tasty. Returning to our conversation, Goblin was quite low. Usually such creatures are armed with old rusty swords, but this time Goblin held a regular wooden stick. Roomba suggested that Ali participated in a duel with Goblin. The guy froze in place. He could not believe that someone really wants a 6-year-old child to fight the monster. There was only one way out, to try to use magic. Roomba only now remembered that Al has a good charm. And Goblin at that moment suddenly stopped and looked in their direction. He seems to have noticed them. The Roomba pulled out his huge sword and warned everyone from approaching, because it could be dangerous. Looking at, Roomba did not find Ala nearby. The guy was already hiding behind the tree, and the Roomba was surprised why he went away. And then he also frightened the hero. He smiled ominously and rushed sharply in his direction. Al made immediately he felt that this man is really set to tighten him in a fight. When the guy realized that there was no other choice, he began to create magic balls right in his palms. He raised his hand and directed the magical power up, and then prevents the Roomba that was going to attack Goblin. He asked him to leave so that he was not accidentally caught. Al lifted his hand forward and released a powerful shot of the Balloists. A bright light broke out around, and Goblin immediately confused and frozen in place. When everything subsided, the guy approached Goblin and paid attention to his torn hand. The blood flowing from it was purple, not at all like human. Earlier, Al hunted only for rabbits and boars, as the feudal lord demanded it. Hunting for him was the usual part of life necessary for survival. He had no time for doubts. It just had to be done. In his thoughts, she came again at a moment when his magic cut his hand in just a second. Al quietly noted that it seems meaningless to him. But Roomba just smiled in response. Because the magic of the guy was no less strange and incomprehensible, the guy smiled and confessed that his real dream was to use magic in everyday life, not on the battlefield. In any world, life remains valuable. As before, Al was convinced that battle was not his way. After this conversation, they went back to the city with a Roomba. One warm sunny day, the hero decided to entertain himself with a delicious dish. In the kitchen cheerfully echoed the bell of the knives. Al tried to prepare a juicy minced meat steak. He asked the assistant where the fried onion went, and he applied it. Meanwhile, Bartolo also brought an ice bowl. The guy prepared everything necessary for the dish, took the stuffing, cut the onion, added breadcrumbs and egg, salt, pepper, and stirred thoroughly with all his hands. To keep the stuffing cool and not soften, it put the ice so that the heat does not affect the mass. To prevent the cutlet from falling apart, Al decided to use his special technique, which everyone was called legendary. Bartolo heard it and did not believe it what he heard. Al learned this secret from his mother. The stuffing should be flipped between his hands 10 times to expel the air. Then the dish will keep in shape and will not break up. He suggested Bartolo too. Almi very imagined that if he had a wife, I would very much like to see how she was cooking in a good apron. But suddenly Bartolo looked at him wary, noticing some strange smile on the boy's face. At this moment, he remembered school years. Once in the cooking lesson, he accidentally dropped the ball of minced meat directly into a classmate. Al asked his assistant to make a small notch inside the cutlet. Although he did not fully realize why he needed it, he still trusted Alahoy and did, as it is said. Soon the delicious cutlets were ready. Bartolo inhaled with their appetizing aroma. Returning, the boys noticed one of the maids. It seems that the aroma of the delicious dish has already reached even further the kitchen. The maid seemed like algae. Al smiled and said that a wild hay was hunting for someone like a real predator. Bartolo could not understand what the beast was, but decided not to pay attention to it. It is time to spread the cutlets on a plate. Water them with sauce and decorate with fresh vegetables. Al suggested that Bartolo try the dish, and he happily agreed. The dish was tender and juicy. The behind-standing maid barely kept not to taste the piece. Al wondered how much more mine would stand, and just watch. Time is not waiting. It is necessary to work. He was going to fry a few more steaks, and even supported Bartolo's idea to add some cheese. Al approved this idea and suggested that you try to add carrots or mushrooms instead of onions. He was convinced that it would also be delicious. Bartolo asked what to do with the remains. Hearing this question, the mine was confused and her cheeks flooded. Bartolo smiled at her and suggested giving her portion so that she could use it during future culinary training. Al only nodded in agreement. The girl could not believe heard and asked if she was allowed to eat it. She sincerely thanked Bartolo. Mina sat at the table and looked with excitement on the cutlet. Bartolo stretched her plate, and the girl happily exclaimed that only one aroma had already made her happy. As soon as she touched the food, Alina appeared nearby. It brought with it a seductive aroma of the dish. Alina suspected that Al thought again, and decided to see for herself. She also ordered this dish. Bartolo and Alo were amazed as if another insatiable monster had emerged before them. Suddenly he grabbed a plate from the hands of a mine and quickly handed it to his older sister. The mine was confused. Her food was just taken before her eyes. Al mentally asked for a mine. In this world, the strong always dictates the rules, and the weak has to obey. Alinora, moved by a gift, joyfully promised to treat her mother. Dinner was quiet, and after her everyone was happy to discuss their impressions. When Alinora left, silence hung in the kitchen. All three stood in place for a long time, as if they had grown to the floor. The unexpected appearance of Alinora completely knocked them out of the track. Bartolo suddenly noticed how Al changed. It seemed that he was faced with a real aristocrat. However, Al did not have a noble origin. He was only a younger brother, and it was important. Bartolo turned to the mine and asked her not to be upset. He promised that he would prepare another steak for her if she waited a little. Mina, smiling through tears, rejoiced in this promise and gladly agreed. Al has yet to put up the story with sugar for later. However, he noticed that there was a barely tangible spark between the two. Al smiled with a trick without commenting on it aloud. Suddenly, Mrs. Mel appeared in the door and asked how much time they were going to go out without work. She strictly ordered not to sigh or argue. No one has cancelled cleaning in the hallway. Mina asked to wait a little, but Mel just pushed her forward and led her. With tears in her eyes, the girl exclaimed that she forgot her cutlet. Al waved goodbye and promised to invite it when he prepared a new portion next time. However, she never tried steak that day, because her mother and younger sister wanted supplements. Bartolo wiped peat from his forehead and noticed that today again is hot outside. Al only sighed. After all, now summer. When they suddenly saw the traitor, they both were alert, but still pretended not to happen, and greeted the merchant. Al congratulated the trial, and noted that he appeared at the right time. The merchant said that a long time had passed from their last meeting. Bartolo and Al smiled and confessed that he had long been waiting for his return. Somehow they behaved, so the guest was a little alert. However, he thanked them and sincerely said that he was also glad. Merchants always closely watch what is happening around and instantly feel any changes. However, they are not peculiar to recognize their misses. The hero could not forget that terrible day for a long time. He gave all their sugar stocks, and then they had a real hell from Bartolo. Al invited a trial to the living room. He said that he opened the store in the capital and helped him with this reverse. At first, the tribute was very worried when he inherited his father's business, but now his father could finally relax. He transferred some of his money to savings for the Laulath family. Al was not sure of how much, But as soon as salt or sugar appeared in the village, he understood that these funds were decent. The trifle often brought cattle to breed it in a new place. Despite his appearance, he was well aware of business, and was able to do business. The case developed exactly as he thought. The merchant sincerely thanked the Alfred, assuring that nothing would work without his help. He expressed his hope for long-term cooperation. The Alfred said that he also counts on it. However, now the merchant sought to move to the more important conversation. To begin with, he had to rest after a long road. Al advised him to relax in the bath. Al went to heat the water. There were no hotels in this place, and a hot bath here was considered a real luxury. Those baths they had were much better than in the capital. But when Al suddenly grabbed his clothes and persistently demanded the truth, he barely rested on his feet. Al was very afraid to make a mistake, so he turned to the merchant with excitement. He nodded, scared, and confessed that he really brought a little. The hero grabbed him, barely holding back emotions. How much? Kilograms or tons? When he learned that the rice was only 100 kilograms, he was very upset. It will definitely not be enough, because rice is the main product in Japanese cuisine. He decided to grow rice on his own. It plans to start with a plot in size. 1/10 of a hectare is about 31 by 31 meters. The harvest will be enough for his own needs. Al was busy with his thoughts and did not pay attention to what he said. It was noticeably annoyed by the trial because it seemed to him that Al was ignored. Did he believe that the merchant brought at least a ton? But he assured again, only 100 kilograms. The hero could not believe his ears. This is not enough. But he took his hands, shook his hand, and thanked for his support. Then he invited him to go to the bathroom, and then, for dinner with a steak. The triumph was surprised by warm hospitality. He tried the candy, and a smile immediately appeared on his face. It was delicious. This is how a simple merchant was almost like a family member. But now Al did not imagine how to tell Bartolo. In his imagination, he already imagined, as he said to the assistant that he had brought the rice for them, and would ask him to forget about revenge. But Bartolo, who was most affected then, will definitely be indignant. Al felt something wrong, and his suspicion was confirmed. The maid said she had just talked with a trial. He remembered, the gentleman had some temptation that he did not resist. The girl was hurrying to Ms. Alinora to convey the important news, but Al suddenly stopped Ming, grabbing her hand firmly. He imperceptibly put 3 candy in her hand and was gently asked to pick them up. The girl's heart was beating so fast that she froze for a moment. Mina was surprised to look at the Alfred and suddenly said that he jumped. Alfred could not understand why she needed it. However, the mind stood on her own. She wanted him to jerk like a rabbit. The hero barely smiled and agreed to her request. After a few jumps from the pockets, candy was suspicious. There were many of them. Al lowered his head and stopped thoughtfully. He reached out for 5 more pieces, apologized, and explained that he had no longer. The mine immediately took one, quickly put in her mouth and smiled happily. Al, with indignation, he raised his hands up. It is clear that it was a real blackmail. A void reigned around, no soul to witness the crime. The hero fiercely shakes his feet, and in his thoughts he angrily outraged on the talkative Trim. Al went into the kitchen and called Bartolo. Bartolo approached and said he brought the pods of aqua. He warned that these pods are very sharp, so they need to be careful. Al agreed that Mina had taken all the candy and sincerely apologized for his inattention. The angry Bartolo poured a whole basket of pods into the stuffing and exclaimed that this could not be forgiven. Al agreed with him. Let him feel the true taste of revenge. While the dish was still preparing, Alina came to the kitchen. She was interested in the delicious smell of cutlets. Bartolo and Al rotely looked at, suspecting that troubles would not be lost. She ordered only 1 portion, because she just returned from training. Al solemnly handed her a steak, looking seriously. Alinora asked again, "Is it really allowed?" The hero replied that he was very grateful to her. But as soon as the girl learned about the special ingredient, it was already too late. She already tried the dish. Tears shouted in the eyes of Alinor's. She quickly took the mug and drank all the water with 1 sip. In her eyes there was a threat. She looked sharply at her brother and Bartolo. If this is a way of thank you, then everything was clear to her. Al became confused and started to go in the words. But in the end he said that his sister for him is a real spice of life, because she is the most ardent person he has ever met. Bartolo covered his face with his palms, and he tried to understand his own words in confusion. Alinora said again that she understood him, and then silently put him in his mouth the last piece of cutlets. Al felt he darkened sharply in his eyes. as if he had swallowed something sharp, and inside the drink, as if the drink had fallen into that throat, the hero lost consciousness instantly. At this time, the tributary received a regular portion of food, not retribution. However, AL promised that his revenge is yet to come. By the way, he thanked for figure. One day, when Al washed, a maid named Sarah gave him a towel. He sincerely thanked her. She said that he was not thanked. It was her business. Al was well aware that Sarah was always kindness. She took care of him since childhood. Now she is about 22. The hero could not pay attention to her black hair, though he tried to look indifferent. He remembered how he recently talked to his mother. In this world, black hair was very rare. Mom thought AL had feelings for Sarah. But AL himself could not understand what she implies. However, her mother noted that her son always looks at Sarah with special warmth. But it was not at all. He just liked black hair. After that event, AL wondered that now people would see something else in it. After all, he has been 33 in his soul. But it's time to cook lunch. On the way, he saw Bartolo with a basket of linen, and that reminded him of the kitchen. Al put a work shirt and thought, once it is so good on the street, it's time to do something. He demonstrated Bartolo a new rice cooker called Hagam, which Logan created specifically at his request. This device cooked perfect rice. Al is pleased to see how white grains were becoming more fluffy and climbing up. When the rice is boiled, the fire is reduced and allowed to insist. It takes time to achieve perfection. He was then wrapped in a towel and was taken to Alistair's storage, where time was faded, so the hot rice remained fresh and could be eaten at any time. Al was very grateful to Logan. Wiping his hands, the hero remembered how Logan really liked the tamago. Then he decided that he would like to like rice dishes. Al mentally imagined how delicious it would be to combine rice with tamagian. It would be a real explosion of taste. It is only a pity that there is no miso soup here. I wonder if soybeans exist in this world. If there is a rice, then there should be beans somewhere. The hero decided that he would definitely find them, even if you have to look for another continent. Suddenly, all the conversations about the Japanese cuisine were cut short. Someone nearly called Alina nearby. I almost dropped the rice out of my hands. The crowd was persecuted by Mrs. Alina during a duel, but there were also those who supported the commander, shouting his name. The hero realized that his sister is now training with the guards. It, as always, is full of perseverance and determination. Suddenly, one important detail floated in memory, and he immediately frozen in place. Without thinking unnecessary, you have to run. The smart always avoids problems. Al ran to Logan's house and called him out loud. He knocked on the door and promised to bring something to eat. The Logan opened the evil and warned sternly, not to vote. He joked, and suddenly someone listens? But Al laughed, because in this place, except Logan, no one. On the smile of Onigiri with a smile, the guy offered to go for a picnic because there was great weather on the street. Logan looked up to the sky, smiled, and decided that he would eat a little later. Al suggested that he go together, but he refused, not understanding why it was needed, but just smiled and said, "It's boring." The hero understood Logan perfectly. He wants to try at least a little, because he is wondering what to taste. In the meantime, he stood behind the door and listened to, smiling cunningly and satisfied. Logan, feeling hungry, took on Giri to try what he tasted. Al only nodded, confirming his assumption. Like all the Altsunders, Logan always spoke frankly. At that moment the door opened sharply. Logan came out of the angry. On his cheek there is a rice grain, so he just does not confess. Al admitted that there was almost no rice left in the estate, so they will no longer be able to cook this dish. Logan agreed that the rice was well suited to tamagian, and asked to bring a little more. When the Logan said goodbye, he sincerely said that he liked everything and the food was delicious. Al remained calm and was not surprised at all. He raised his hands to heaven and decided that it was time for a real picnic. The guy looked at the waterfall with delight when he walked through the forest, and a quiet lake was passing a little further. Logan could not get rid of the thought. Would he go with Allah if he infused on his own? Al did not have friends, only adults. Because of this, he felt depressed. He was disappointed, so he decided to invite his brother Silvio for a walk. He may agree to bring a book with him and read together. The girls immediately recognized the guy from the distant. This is the younger brother of Ms. Alina, Mr. Alfred. One of the girls sat in front of him, smiling and asked to contact her Emma. Al, in response, he introduced himself to the second son of the Lovelay and sincerely thanked her for the care of her sister. Emma was sincerely happy. She was such a polite attitude from her brother Ms. Alinora. Meanwhile, Sheila wondered whether it was related to his noble manners. The older sister was only quietly muttered that the guy just felt polite. Emma seemed to him a very nice girl. She seems to be a little admired. The first impression is only 10 seconds. If you put it a little, she will definitely become his fan. The second girl, who was called Sheila, smiled warmly Alfred. In response, he politely said that he was glad to meet. Al, having 33 years of life behind his shoulders, he paid attention to the aesthetic detail when Sheila leaned. His thoughts became a little risky, so he quickly turned his eyes on his chest. Everything was calm here, and he sighed with relief. Sheila wondered what his plans for today. Al said he wanted to find a picturesque place in the mountains and have a picnic. The girls liked this idea because the sun shines and the weather is excellent. Alina apologized and promised that she was asking Bartolo to prepare lunch for them. The girls are happy. The dishes that Bartolo prepare always bring real pleasure. Hearing about bento, Bartolo was surprised, because the ingredients for 4 people may not be enough. He has not yet had time to replenish. Al thanked him for his efforts. Finally, the whole company went for a picnic. Alinora noticed that, although outside in summer, the air is quite fresh. Emma agreed with a smile, enjoying a light, nice breeze. Emma reached out to Alla to support him on a steep slope. She wanted to make sure that everything was fine. In response, the guy smiled, showing that everything is well with him. Alinora, a little angry, reminded that Al has long been learning to fencing, so such a bias for him is a small thing. Emma immediately apologized and removed her hand, and Al upset. Her sister again destroyed everything. Emma was embarrassed. She was prevented by painful calluses from workouts with a wooden sword. Al did not immediately realize why she was feeling so. Then Sheila explained that they have been engaged in custody for 2 years. Emma was fond of Ms. Alina, who always kept a level with a guard and skillfully possessed a sword. Other girls also dreamed of becoming as strong as she. We were explained that Al began to train only this spring. His sister said that he deals every day, although her dad and she are quite strict with him. Alina agreed that such perseverance is quite good. The Sheila loudly stuck his stomach. She suggested making a stop to eat. Emma asked to suffer a little, because they have almost reached. But Sheila did not stay, because bento was just an incredible smell. From this hill, a wonderful landscape opened to the whole village of Coliant, and in the distance you could see the estate in which Alina lived. Al deep inhaled the fresh air and gladly raised his hands up to the sky. Sheila, meanwhile, hurried to call everyone at the table, because she had long been hungry and could not wait. Emma laughed. She knew well that Sheila always reacts so much when she was talking about food. Finally, they laid out food on the lawn and sat down together. Emma opened her box and immediately saw what a beautiful dish there. It was evident that Bartolo made a lot of efforts to look so appetizing. Sheila noted that there were very little tamagian. She remembered Bartolo warned, the ingredients were not enough. However, Al decided that this is enough for lunch. He decided to add some food from his storage space to the meal. Sheila chose the tamagayaki, and shaking, immediately blossomed. The dish literally melted in her mouth. Meanwhile, Emma also got her bento and decided to try to have a snack. Alla's sister praised onigiri. She liked a pleasant texture and softness that felt from the first bite. Emma nodded, agreeing with her. Al noted that onigiri is the most delicious when they are still warm. The girls decided that it was probably another interesting recipe from Bartolo, and the guy immediately confirmed it. He added that onigiri also tastes great with fish. After a hearty dinner, Al fell on the grass. Around, delicious food, wonderful landscapes, peace, and free time. Everything that was actually valuable to Coliant was here, nearby. Suddenly, a strange cry of a bird came in the air. Al was frightened and stood up sharply. He looked into the sky. Al decided to ask the sister what a strange bird. She was surprised. Does he not know? It was a funya, a bird that can sometimes be seen on mountain peaks. But not only his voice was surprised, he was able to run on the ground, although sometimes stumbled. Al, with interest, he watched it and thought it was a real wonder. The hero asked how long his sister would speak this strange, too polite tone. She replied that when she is far from home, she always says that way. The girl confidently replied that she would not pay attention to these words, because every girl has her own secrets. Al sharply faded. He immediately understood everything. Emma smiled. It seems that Ms. Alina really cares about her brother. Sheila looked at them and nodded quietly, clearly agreeing with it. Al decided to ask, did the sister really worry about him? Emma apologized that the conversation became known. Alina belonged to those people who, even during laughter, remained serious on the face. In such a situation, the hero did not understand what was happening. Everything seemed very strange to him. The sister took her eyes and muttered that she was indifferent. She only wanted to make sure that he was not left behind. Al, for a moment, he just looked at her silently. One day he visited the local tavern. Haz and bustle were dominated everywhere, and the old Carl barely had time to serve everyone. It turned out that the reason was a generous harvest and preparation for the festival, which was to take place in 5 days. Al did not notice how this time came. The harvest is almost over. Carl was convinced that in 3 days the village would be filled with a festive fuss. This year they also decided to hold a dream tournament. She thought Alfred would also participate, and he confirmed it. The tavern prevailed in the festive mood. Syria smiled, noting that it is at least not as noisy as in a big house. Al went on the bed and smiled. Outside the window, and it was really noisy. He pulled 2 pairs of pants, warmed with fire magic, and already decided that on such a cold day, it is best to stay in a cozy place. But suddenly, his sister broke into the room. "It's time to do fencing," he muttered, dissatisfied with a pillow that she did not even knock. "After all, it's cold outside." But Alinora just smiled. "If you do not train, you will not be better." Al reminded that time is already preparing for the festival. His sister assured that even if not everything is done now, you can always work out and become better. She noticed that he was looking and promised to help him change the facial expression. At first she advised to get rid of anger. Al only waved his hand, realizing that he would still change nothing. He was shaking from the cold outside. The sister shouted to him, "What became? Move, and we'll become warmer." But he just looked at her and said nothing. He could not believe his own eyes. Alina and Silvio appeared in shorts and t-shirts. "Isn't they cold?" Silvio greeted cheerfully and with a smile. He remembered how students specifically wear t-shirts in winter to look cool. They assure that they are not cold, though it is not true. A small sister can still be understood. But why does Silvio's brother behave like that? He only explained that he became warmer when he moves. Meanwhile, Alina insisted that he finally answered her previous question. While they ran, the sister again raised the question. But Al only turned away, because her perseverance began to annoy him. Silvio intervened in a dispute and suggested that the duel resolve. Al is noticeably excited. This proposal alarmed him. After the jogging, his father smiled and said it was time to work with his sword. The children obediently rose, even Al, which at that time faded. It was only 5 months since he first took a wooden sword. Recently, during the blows, he began to hear a soft, pleasant whistle. However, the father noted that the strength for a real blow is not enough. It is necessary to learn how to put all the weight of your body in each attempt. Al missed about how Silvio always asked his father about fencing. He really treated it very seriously. His sister was as hard. Alinora did not pay attention to anyone, and worked her strokes persistently. Al began to suspect that wooden swords were not as safe as it seemed. Suddenly, Alina looked at him straight into his eyes, and caught suddenly. Al did not understand what had just happened. His eyes were closely monitored by a leaf that was slowly circling. Suddenly, before his eyes, the sheet broke into 4 identical parts. The sister in one movement cut the leaf into 4 parts. There was only one short sound. Alina immediately understood her look. If he is angry, it can happen to him. The father approached and reminded her daughter that it was only the beginning of the workout. He said that the sword could not be lucky. Alina apologized and politely bowed. After that, sparring began. Silvio smiled Allah and suggested to hold an honest match. The hero was dissatisfied because this time he would have to compete with his brother Silvio. Recalling that he said Alinai, Al felt sorry for he could not somehow answer his words. Silvio smiled that it was just a workout, so there is no point to be upset. But despite this, Al went out to the duel completely ready. Silvio took a deep breath as suddenly an unexpected attack came from him. He was genuinely surprised by such a sudden attack. The brother acknowledged that if you make an effort, Al is really impressive. His defense was actually strong. To resist such a strong rival as Alinora, you need to have a great skill. The hero encroaches on her thigh, but misses. Silvio managed to repel the attack, and Al sincerely thanked him for it. Now Al will know how to apply this technique in next battles. The sound that arose from the collision of wooden swords suddenly cut off their duel. The hero looked at his father and sister in surprise. The unusual sound sounded around. Enemies filled their swords with magic. Alina was also able to control the fire, but did it not too skillful. Her strength was not enough, and to harm even one goblin, she had to let fire balls 3 times. Mana increases if you spend it all and let it recover. Every day he repeated it to his sister, though it seemed to him that she did not hear him. Finally, Dad stopped the workout. Today, it was enough. The children thanked him, but all that he never had time to play with his brother. It is time to heat the water in the bath. Previously, a special magic device was used for this purpose, but now Al did it with the help of his magic, and came out even twice faster. Al decided not to rely on the fiery magic of sister or water magic of mom. He still remembered how the ice suddenly exploded, and after that he could not trust them completely. He was ill, because he played bathing water, being undressed. As a sign of revenge, he poured an ice water into the bathroom next time. While Al checked with the bath, Silvio accidentally passed him. Al allowed the brother to pass in front. Silvio thanked and headed for his clothes. Both smiled, because everyone had a reason to be satisfied. The hero could not refrain from laughing. To imagine Silvio bathe in the Arctic Ocean was too funny. He melted the ice by releasing a lot of steam to create the illusion of hot water. Silvio does not guess until he dives, so he wanted to take revenge on his sister's hurt, because revenge should be cold. But the hero did not resist, and decided to see how the brother would react. But instead of the answer, he heard a loud cry, from which he jumped. A sister appeared in the door. She thought that the water had already heated enough because she saw a couple, so she came in. But the bath was cold like ice. The sister immediately realized who was guilty of it. Al froze in place. He opened the door without even thinking. Alina looked at him so that he had shook his hands. He decided, if the door has time to close, then the victory will be. Carefully, almost silent so as not to create any noise. Another moment, her leg appeared at the door. On the face, a dangerous smile. She thought, if she could, she would have broken his neck for a long time. At the verge of death before his eyes, his whole story flashed. Al felt it like no other, without exaggeration. The next day, Al together with his mother entrusted for shopping. The Tri was delighted. There are so many stylish clothes around. Many new acquaintances have emerged thanks to the success. The sister was always fond of dresses but weapons. She almost showed femininity. The seller decided to help the Alfred and showed him clothes for men. Al chose a shirt with a large collar. There were almost no jewelry or embroidery. He sighed quietly, because he wanted something more modest. He said he would wear it when he grows up and becomes like his father. But Alina only shook her head and advised not to try. Al felt a touch on his shoulder. The seller stretched his soft jacket, and his mother brought a warm overalls. Al reminded everyone that he wants to choose clothes. However, in his soul, he also wanted to wear things like Silvio. Mom explained that it is not how much clothes cost or what size. There are things that can only be worn by those who have received a certain rank. Al could not understand why such things were shown here at all. The merchant said that he brought these things at the request of Mrs. Helen. She wanted the Alfred to learn more about the titles and ranks that were displayed in clothing. The hero was moved by such care of his mother. Mom looked at her clothes and said she looked good but too simple. Al angrily, he was in return that he just liked it. The mother gave him clothes and advised him to dress behind the screen. Al, depressed, slowly headed for the first time. Eleonora, meanwhile, silently looked at things with a gloomy face. She took the sword in her hands and wondered, why make it only decoration? It is better to be a real weapon. Mom glanced with dissatisfaction. Her swords again. She reminded her daughter for the 3rd time that she would be more feminine. But Eleonora didn't even want to hear it. Al acknowledged, this suit, though not as fashionable as those wearing Silvio, was very easy and comfortable. He liked the color, too. Just looking at yourself in the mirror and spinning is not quite for him. Returning, Al said he had already dressed. Eleonora, his mother, and the seller looked at him carefully, and he could not understand why. Mom confessed that the jacket suits him. She would look on someone else. But Ali sat very well. She asked him to turn around and bend her knees. The dressing did not end. The hero tried on 12 sets and was completely tired. Now he finally felt how it was to go shopping with his wife on a weekend. Meanwhile, my mother was already beginning to worry about Alina. The girl went in a confusion between things in the men's department. It was not easy for her. Mom decided to offer Alina something more feminine, and after short persuases, the girl agreed to go to the best, though without much desire. Al noticed how gently and carefully intervened the situation. and it was surprised. But when it came to Alina, all efforts were in vain. The trial promised to choose a few things for her. Mom just sighed because she was sure that these things would be right for her. Alinora could become a real beauty if she wanted, but she was not interested in fashion. Al felt her, because her mother dreamed that her daughter had other hobbies other than her sword possession. But Al already guessed what is the matter. Alina would choose something comfortable for training. Mom just sighed back. The hero immediately realized, if he has more clothes, you will have to train in the morning less. Mom made an offer. If you put on this dress, then others will not have to try. Alinora felt the cold ran on her back. The sister sat upset, as if all her joy had disappeared. Al worried about whether she would like her dress, but her mother firmly believed that everything would be fine. Mom did not insist. If he does not want to, may not measure. But then, the workout will have to miss. Al wondered. If it helps to see the unusual beauty of the sister, so be it. Within half an hour, Alina shouted with her brother with a trial, and they carefully crossed the threshold. The sister, a little embarrassed, appeared in the dress that she helped to wear Sarah. Al and the trifle froze with surprise. She looked surprisingly good. However, Alina felt uncertain and almost moved. Mom smiled happy. It was for this result that she hoped. Another dress and the fittings will end. Al killed. If this goes so, they can still have time to train. Al was upset, but decided that it was worth at least a little fun. The seller asked him if he was fine. It has been 40 minutes before they took up the next dress. It turned out to be longer than expected. But Al was glad that they spent less time on the sword. The sister put on a lush dress, changed her hairstyle, and decorated her hair with beautiful accessories. Al was surprised at her and asked who the girl was. Alinora quietly replied that she was. Al jumped away from surprise. The voice was familiar, but he immediately realized that he was only dressed in front of him. His sister denied indignation. Mom reminded that he did not knock his feet in such an outfit. Alinora quietly asked him to dress in training clothes instead of a dress. She immediately forgot about fatigue and changed her very quickly. The dress was inconvenient to move, and she didn't like the hairstyle. It was more to walk with loose hair. The sister has easily exhaled and quickly dressed in her ordinary clothes. She said she liked to walk in everyday things. The mother became a little annoying, because in Alinora's dress looked especially sweet. Happy, she quickly took Ala by her hand and offered to work together. But at first they decided to have lunch. Al was genuinely impressed with the grace she had just demonstrated. The sister cheerfully grabbed his hand, encouraging to run faster. Alodin was already tired, but he realized another crazy day awaits him. Disassembling the drawers in the warehouse, the hero unexpectedly finds what seems to him a real treasure. When Alafa was walking the street, one of the local residents greeted him with him, contacting him as Mr. Theodal. The peasants thought that their father, together with their son, patrolled the village and asked them not to be tired. In the meantime, everyone was preparing for the harvest. The peasants were happy to share their harvest. This testified to the order and well-being in their homes. This indicated that the family had already settled in the village and felt well there. The father, along with Silvio, was completely agreed. The stocks in the pantry were getting more. Bags and products have already occupied almost the entire space. Over time, all of this gathered in the House of Lasses. There was no free corner in the pantry. Al looked at the piles of potatoes and realized that autumn had come. He once tried to light a fire with the help of leaves, but it was difficult to keep the flames under control. There were no microwaves in this world, so the hero decided to build his own building, this time from a stone. Today, he really wanted to try something unusual. Owing in the mountains, he suddenly came across the right thing, a large, deep vase. She perfectly answered all his ideas. Now, it was only necessary to take this vase to the garden. With magic, it would be quite simple, but the vase was dirty and his clothes were new. Looking around, he made sure that the place was right. Moving a vase right to the garden would be too dangerous. Suddenly someone will see it. The hero returned to the base and decided that it is time to take the next step, carefully bypass his father's office. He easily touched a vase and whispered that they were now being flipped together. Make sure that there was no one nearby. He finally dared to apply the spell. The vase disappeared somewhere. Al is already about to take advantage of the ability to move, but suddenly someone called him by the name. This voice was anxiously familiar. Looking at, he suddenly saw Alina and shuddered at the surprise. Then his gaze fell on the window. That's where the way out. The guy looked around, but there was no sister nearby. He already started thinking that he just thought, Maybe it just seemed? Then he heard Dad as he asks Alina what happened. The girl replied that she saw Alla from the window. Silvio was surprised because he did not notice anyone around. His sister was even more surprised. She couldn't believe that he did not even hear any steps. Al froze by the window, surprised by her imagination. Alina strictly asked why he came. The guy lied that he was just going to the stable. He understood that his sister almost never recognized his lies, but still decided not to speak frank rejection. The sister said she could help him with the documents if he had so much free time. She seems to be really suspected. The guy wondered, did his mom and dad really force her sister to do it? He said she would be better about arithmetic. The sister was offended, but agreed. Silvio advised to leave these papers with his sister. Al, in response, he joked that his sister would be more suitable for a needle, but then she would not have time for training. Eleonora changed her mind at the same moment. She decided to leave Silvio to work with the numbers and to focus on training. Ali's devotion to the sword really impressed him. It seemed to him that people who were sincerely indulged in their business were really special. Silvio, no doubt, is waiting for a wonderful future. The vase is already clean. You can now pour coal, put a metal grate inside, and prepare baking potatoes. When everything was ready, the hero glanced to look at his just-made ceramic stove. Al put a metal basket for sweet potatoes and under it coal. That's all. The stove is ready. He waved his hand, and with the help of fiery magic ignited coal. Then he lifted the lid, an old wooden board from a teleport, carefully covered a vase, sat side by side, and closed his eyes with relief, imagining fragrant blush. Coal slowly gave heat, and the potatoes were evenly felt on all sides. Due to the diatomite in the vessel, its aroma became more expressive, and the taste more saturated. It remains about half an hour until fully cooked. The hero did not want to sit out of work and decided to use this time to train in magic. At first he used the magic of fire, and then changed it to the magic of water. Although this exercise looked simple, it really helped to better control magic and even gave pleasant feelings. He gradually remembered the words of the sister. The more you train, the better the results you achieve. She spoke of fencing. The same fencing and magic are completely different things. You will not light the fire with the sword, and during the battle of water you will not collect from it. Suddenly, a church bell sounded in silence. The hero looked at the clock and was surprised. 40 minutes had passed. Time missed unnoticed. He removed the potatoes with magic. She was hot to the touch, so it's time to taste. He touched as he felt a strong heat and shook his hand, shouting in pain. It was incredibly hot. The potatoes turned out to be so soft, gentle, and juicy that it was even difficult to believe. The moment is when it is worth trying. Its sweet taste was natural, without excessive sugars. The flesh remained gentle and kept shape, and the skin did not burn. It was the most delicious dish of all that he ever tasted. He even ate the skin with pleasure without hesitation. He just got to rest when his sister's voice heard. Eleonora and Dad and Silvio went into the room. They wanted to find out what Al now did. The hero froze in place, realizing that everything is already over. Silvio noted that the vase to the touch of heat and wondered what it was brought. My father shouted with horror when he recognized the vase. It was the gift from Vicenda Julian. The children were also very scared. Al could not understand why this thing was in the shed. He took it to cook baked potatoes, and only then noticed that the vase really looks very expensive. The hero shuddered with fear. It was the gift of Noble himself. He only prayed that they would not be punished. They were still hesitant, and in the meantime, Silvio and his sister looked into a vase, from where a pleasant aroma flowed. The sister breathed him with delight, and his brother did not resist and laughed. The father assured that the vase had no value, so there was no reason to be angry. Subsequently, he promised to tell his son everything in detail. When his father approached the children, he asked them some potatoes. Al immediately he was worried and grabbed his head, thinking that his dad was angry with him. As a result, everything was only a short lecture. The father just said that Al did not take anything from the shed without permission. Al nodded and hoped that it would all end. On the eve of the holiday in the kitchen, the feudal lord was dominated by a real mess. Bartolo was worried. Are vegetables ready? Yes, they are already prepared. Now, you need to cut everything finely. Al stood away and saw all around as if he had fallen into the very swirl of events. Today, a long-awaited day has come in the Colia, the harvest holiday. All residents were looking forward to this event, because a large tournament was to take place. It was the only day when the whole village was able to relax and forget about their worries. At the holiday, guests were constantly being treated, drank, had fun, and danced. They enjoyed entertainment for 3 days in a row, forgetting all the worries. When there was little harvest, the celebration was quiet and simple. People believed that next year the earth would give more gifts, so they prayed for generosity and good harvest. This year the holiday was even more fun, because AL received a good profit from its reverse. Thanks to this, the usual celebration of the crop has become a real lush anniversary party. Al noted that Bartolo had fully immersed in his work. He sighed heavily, knowing, no matter how much he cooks, this is not always enough. This reminded the boy of his guilt, the case with Vasnagaroda when he was cooking baked potatoes. Walking through the path next to the field, the hero suddenly looked around. Something unusual fell into his eyes. Once on this field, gold wheat grew, and now only the empty plain remained here. In his past life, he was so hurried that he did not even pay attention to the change of the seasons. And now, he could finally stop and really see how the world is changing around. Enjoying a beautiful landscape, Al returned to the village and sincerely congratulated the peasants. The village changed beyond recognition. People were walking everywhere. Everything was fluttering with bright colors and festive decorations. The guy paid attention to many new people around. These were travelers, sellers, and shopkeepers. Although the building was just erected, the free space was still not enough. Al, making his way through the human crowd, he saw Roland and waved his hand. The hero wondered how many more people would appear. Roland estimated that about 20 people could still come. Al felt embarrassed among a large crowd of adults. Al thought that it was so tight here, hardly anyone else could go. Roland only smiled in response. If the place is not enough, let them play outside. It would be difficult to organize a match. There is neither space nor a good view. Al came to the counter, where he met Syria. She congratulated Mr. Alfred. The guy asked if the chairs and tables could be taken to the yard. The woman allowed and asked for still to sweep after untidy guests. But immediately he rushed to look for chairs, immediately promising to do everything he needed. And Roland wanted to deal with a dirty guy himself. But Syria stopped him with a sharp, harsh look. Roland quickly realized that he was better fleeing. At this point, AL, using magic, placed chairs and tables. When everything was ready, everyone was surprised at the chair. The guy really skillfully coped with his work. Roland agreed. Magic is really cool. One of the guys noted that it was the witchcraft of the earth, though he confessed that he would never have been able to. Roland confessed that his magic of fire is so weak that only a tree can set fire to, and only 3 times a day. Comrade immediately said, "You are still far from Alfred." Roland showed a Wester, hinting that there is a power to control water. He asked what Wester was capable of. This Wester said that only a bucket of water can collect. Roland only laughed in response to such a modest answer. Roland joked, "What will you do if you suddenly happen?" Wester quit in response. "And what, do you set yourself on fire?" Al immediately he felt that the conversation was gaining a contradictory tone. The crowd has increasingly incited, and some people have even started betting. Al begged everyone, because the girls were already scared. The girls in the hall were already vividly imagined which of the boys leads and who obeys. It seemed that they liked it the most, and they laughed cheerfully, discussing it. The girlfriend did not understand the hint, because Wester just won. Instead, the blonde smiled mysteriously. She liked both options. At this point, an annoyed Syria came out of the room. She said sharply to Silence and added, "If she wants to fight so much, go to the tournament." She reminded everyone that they were here through the tournament. Aller has nodded, as in front of a mother who strictly oversees. Roland with Vester immediately subsided. Roland smiled boldly and challenged, "Let's decide everything in a reverse." Wester agreed without hesitation, though he thought that he should have suggested first. The boys dispersed in different directions, angrily, and the girls just smiled and laughed quietly. How fun they are, these guys. But in the first round, Roland and Wester were defeated and left the tournament. Al easily went on, because it was he who came up with a reverse. It would be strange if he lost at the beginning. Al noticed that one of the shops was already distributing lunch. Soon the tournament would start again, and he sincerely hoped that Charles would go on to have a chance to take revenge. Among the audience, someone suggested their move, but the other immediately denied. They say, "You can do much better." A real dispute broke out between them, even the reproaches who play worse. Al only smiled, noticing that the audience had already begun to consider themselves true strategists. Roland shared with Wester, which he also left in the first round. Wester only muttered that he was not lucky with the enemy. If someone else fell, he would have won. These two seemed to find common ground, Wester suggested that his opponent was a foreigner. No one could say for sure where the guy had this power. Wester asked who won Roland. In response, he heard that it was the one who ate Tamagian. Wester expected his opponent to be a little stronger. However, Roland seemed completely powerless, and it only convinced Wester of his weakness. Meanwhile, Al did his best to not pay attention to them. When Al looked at the guy, he suddenly realized his face was completely unfamiliar. It alarmed him. For some reason, the guy felt anxiety next to these foreigners. He understood that he had to be careful. Herman suddenly appeared and informed Alfred that his rival in the second round would be again the same guy who loves Tamagayak. Herman said that as soon as they both be ready, you can start. However, the man had already reached out his empty plate and asked for some more food. Charles warned him, if he eats everything, others may not be enough. The girl was surprised. Is he going to eat again? But the guy only silently threw her bag with gold coins. Al has opened his eyes widely. Almost no one carries out gold in the village. Probably this man, like a Roomba, adventurer. Strong and arousing some suspicion. The man got up and turned to the organizer, asking if his next rival would be a boy. I just looked at the guy, and at once everything became clear. It is for sure. Herman agreed. You can start. The husband, calling Melmar, suggested playing together. Al, in response, he politely said how his name is. During the celebration of the Harvest Day, a second round of the Reversi Tournament began in the village of Colliet. This duel is involved in the second son of the feudal lord, Alfred Light. His opponent is a mysterious man named Melmar. Alfred won a confident victory. His rival recognizes defeat, so the guy goes into the third round. While playing, Al noticed that Melmar was not as powerful as it seemed at first. He imagined the true power of the creator of the reverse. After the game, the man wanted Tamagaiki again, but Carla refused him. She proposed to cook spaghetti. Alfred laughed. This time Carl showed herself as a real stubborn gourmet. Most adults would be angry with losing their baby, but Melmar remained calm. Al realized, now he needs to gain his trust. The hero thought that they could become a wonderful team with the Roomba. The viewer approached Alova and praised him for his brilliant tactics. She really impressed everyone. The guy smiled and asked what his name was. The stranger apologized to the conversation a little and called Yulene. He added that he hopes to meet again while playing. Yulena politely appealed to Charles to pour her fruit water. Al, for a moment, he thought, remembering their names. It seemed to him that he had already heard them before. And perhaps it just seems. After that, Al began to win in all his games and soon reached the finals of the tournament. In the finals, he collided with Julen, the same man with a pinched eyes who won Carl. Yulen's confidently played all her rivals. Of course, he has not yet reached his brother Silvio, but Julen was still a dangerous rival. Al acutely felt tension. For him now, everything was decided by his own pride. Now all the attention was drawn to the decisive duel. When Al with the opponent went to the table, the audience greeted them with loud applause. Carla wished him luck. Roland thought who would be the winner, and Wester was convinced Mr. Alfred would win exactly. Last time, he effortlessly overcame Carl. Roland tried to reassure him, but the girl noticed it and looked at the Wester angrily, reminding that it was he who invented the reverse. Julen easily bypassed her without even making much effort. Wester stubbornly said that a worthy game is ahead. Carla asked her to be reminded of defeat anymore, but Wester could not stay and said again, there was always a winner and the one who lost. Roland agreed with that. Al thought that he would be angry in the place even harder. She wondered who they support. Roland has a bet on 5 coins on Alfred. The peasants were also enthusiastically enthusiastic. Some cheered for Alfred, others for Julen. Al smiled, thinking that all it is fun until the defeat causes pain. Before the competition, Julen wished a good game, and Al wished the same. Herman solemnly announced the start of the Reversi Tournament and made a sign to start the competition. He suggested playing in black figures, and the hero did not hesitate to take it, taking the white. Julen did not look at the one who places simple traps. Al decided to act unexpectedly and carefully calculated how many chips could be taken away. He believed that a real battle awaited him. Finally, the game began. Everyone hoped for something extraordinary, but everything happened quite quietly. However, you should not forget, this is just a party in a reverse. Roland was surprised why Al chose this place for his chip. He could put it anywhere. Wester smiled and said that it was just foolish, but Carla intervened and reminded, sometimes it is better not to rush or pick up chips first. Both players were determined to fight until the end. At first it seemed that Julen was ahead of everyone in the number of chips. But in fact, During the game, it does not mean victory. It is only important to win when it is over. All Ayla tactics were like a real offensive. Suddenly he noticed something interesting. He realized that the hero cunningly narrowed the space for movement. Now the guy could only walk diagonally, following the plan proposed by Al. Al specifically forced Yulin to choose such positions, from which it is almost impossible to move further. In the meantime, he won the field flanks, such places that are difficult to return under control when the game is already gaining momentum. Yulina suddenly realized that the opponent had already taken over the most important positions. Roland only looked around in confusion, and Wester answered it with a light smile. Rommel suggested to explain everything, but Wester overturned this task of Carl, although in fact he himself had no idea what was happening. Carl said that Mr. Alfred cunningly lured Julin in a trap. Wherever the guy was moving, Alfred chose favorable corners and positions. Roland with Wester seems to have never been stopped. They may not be able to play the reverse at all. Carl reproached Wester that he did not understand anything until she explained everything in detail. She believed that they relied too on their instincts, which was why they were defeated. However, despite all the differences, together this trinity looked quite bright. Yulin felt that this game was a real test for him. Finally, he confessed to himself. He could not find a way to win. Al smiled and confidently brought the game to the end, finishing the match with a score of 51-13. Herman put his hand on his shoulder. He won honestly. Mr. Alfred became the tournament champion. Yulina thanked him with his strong hand. Al noticed that he really believes in his own strength. Yulin was distinguished by his deep mind, though he was still lacking in experience. In the end, he really lacked experiences. Al decided that one day would surely arrange a match between him and Silvio. One of the visitors ordered beverages, tamagonas without sugar and some meat. Syria immediately realized that she needed, even without unnecessary words. Melnar called the champion, waved a bag with coins, and suggested that he treat. Al smiled and agreed with pleasure. Suddenly, Julina approaches the company and asks if you can join. Melnar gladly invites him to sit side by side. Al immediately he notices that these two seems to be familiar. Melnar called Syria and asked to bring 3 mugs L. The girl was surprised and asked if 3 needed. Julian was indignant immediately. How can I order L for a child? No one then guessed that AL was already an adult. So Melnar chose himself fruit water, and AL ordered spaghetti. Julian also joined them and decided to taste spaghetti, because it was in this place that they came up with them. Carla smiled and remembered that this recipe was invented by Mr. Alfred. Julian looked at him in surprise, and AL answered only a light smile. They raised the glasses, rejoicing in the victory of Mr. Alfred. AL together drank a glass of juice to the bottom. Melnar laughed. The guy looked as if he had just tasted strong L. Of course, it was in fact just water with the taste of fruit. Melnar wanted to give the boy to taste the real ale, but Yulin immediately stopped him. Melnar agreed that Alfred was still a baby. When he was asked how old he was, Al replied that he was 6. Yulina struck that the boy is so calm despite her young age. Alfred explained that strict education is guilty of everything. Yulina suggested that everyone relax and treat everyone with delicious fruit water. Alovi liked such a friendly atmosphere and how they were treated. Subsequently, the boy addressed everyone and said, "I'm Alfred. I'm 6 years old. I will show you focus now." Everyone around you began to wait with interest. What would happen next? AL, with the help of Magic Earth, created a box around him and said confidently, "He will get out of it in 10 seconds without breaking the structure." People doubted whether it was real. Then AL asked them to count aloud from 10 to 1. As soon as they finished, the box closed itself. The audience began to count a little confusedly. Al, in his thoughts, he promised to himself that he would surprise everyone. It is time to show what he really was capable of. Suddenly, a bright light broke out around, that everyone had to close their eyes immediately. The box scattered, but Allah disappeared. Everyone was looking for him excitedly. Where could he go? The bright light was still blinding. When they turned, they noticed Allah, who had already stood behind their backs. Everyone asked how he managed to get out. Al stood silently as he was fascinated by the applause. It seemed just disappeared and immediately reappeared. Some even decided that the guy was teleporting to the kitchen, but in fact he just broke the box and went through the door. Al sincerely thanked everyone and asked if they liked the speech. The audience exclaimed, because the room was simply incredible. They persuaded Allah to repeat the speech again. However, Al knew well. As soon as you tell the secret of focus after the first time, a miracle disappears, and no longer makes such an impression. He even thought of calling this trick the incredible escape of King Alfred. Syria treated everyone with chilled fruit water. Al thanked her, but she smiled mysteriously and said, "You want to thank? Open some secret to me." Alina confessed that he did not understand anything from this proposal. Al laughed and said, "How to tell a secret? There will be no show." Syria agreed with him, and the guy thanked her for the drink. Al felt that the drink in his glass was still warm, so he decided to cool it with the help of ice magic. At that moment, Julin and Elnar looked at his glass in surprise. Julin was very surprised to see how Al was using magic again. He did not even suspect that he was able to control ice. Elnar remembered the icy princess and the capital of the kingdom, where such magic is a common matter. Al was surprised at him. For the first time in his life, he heard about the icy princess. The men were surprised that the guy had the same magical power as the princess from the main city of the kingdom. Al looked at them in confusion, not understanding who they were talking about. Elnar explained that the girl is called the Ice Princess, and in fact she is the third princess of the kingdom of Misfeld. Ordinary people had no choice but to give it such a loud nickname. But Al wondered, does she have any other names? What else is it called? Men replied that others call her a high throne. Although it was called a doll, it was a little exaggerated, and Al could not understand why she was given such a nickname. Layla, the third princess of Misfeld, could not walk from birth. Because of this, she was often treated cold, or even cruelly, and few people were concerned. But when she was able to master the magic of ice herself, people completely changed their mind. They met it with warmth and openness. Through the hypocrisy of the surrounding Layla, she stopped trusting people and even her family. To see the true essence of those who are near, sometimes it is too painful. Al sincerely regretted the girl and sympathized with her suffering. Al explained that all this is only rumors, even if they seem very plausible. It was important for him to make sure that it was just a conversation among people. Alina smiled and confessed that he was a special person. Then he removed his mask and warned the guy, "Now there is no time for children's fun, so you should not cling to him." Al and he guessed that Kovaluga would say something like that. The guy was even more surprised when Elnar confessed, "He is not like everyone else." Al is paid, because two unusual adults sat opposite him. Why did they come here? Why did you choose this distant village? Yulin laughed and said that they were not taken too seriously. Elnar was actually an earl, and Julin was viscount, and both were friends with Lord Nord. Al was stunned when he realized who was in front of him. They came to see their own things in the village. Lord had to report possible guests in advance. Earlier, Bartolo said that important persons could come to the village this year. Yulina learned from the locals that Al is the second son of the Nord. Al himself confirmed this, saying that he was really the son of Alfred. Elnar expressed the opinion that the guy really looks like his parents, but he is most impressed with him a little funny. Al just smiled in response. In the meantime, Yulin stood up and reported that they were already going to go. He put several gold coins on the table. Almighty asked, "Where are you going?" Yulina explained that they were in a hurry to the estate, because his wife had to come and should not be forced to wait. Al was impressed when he learned that Julin also had a man. When Al came to the carriage, he paid attention to the emblem with the image of an eagle. Yulin said that it was a symbol of their kind, which his grandfather received from the hands of the king himself. Al noted that it looks quite cool. Then his gaze fell on another carriage larger than the first one, and he suggested that she probably owned Melnar. On that carriage, clearly visible crossed swords. Melnar replied that their family coats of arms could not be compared to the coat of arms of the Lolatites. But Yulin's winked cunningly, because it was on the coat of arms of Laulaths that the dragon is depicted, Alm aware that their carriage depicts a large dragon. His father never loved when he was called a dragon fiender, but now you don't hide anywhere. Al smiled at himself. I wonder, can someone be ashamed of such a nickname? He almost laughed at one nickname. Melnar noticed it, and Julin smiled in response, though he realized that it was too much. Al thought that he would not like to wear such a nickname. He imagined himself a dragon fiender, and this thought made him laughing that he could barely stay with laughter. Then Melnar took and pulled him lightly for his cheeks so that he would calm down a little. Suddenly the father of Allah appeared from the back and asked where the Dragonoctor was. All three at the same time turned. There was Lord Lowlight. Melnar worshipped, called himself a representative of the noble Misfeld kind, and thanked for the invitation. Along with him, Julin also bowed low and named his name, Yulin Estelle. Although they were dressed like ordinary peasants, they immediately felt special nobility. Their confident movements and behavior left no doubt in Allah. There were real aristocrats. Al congratulated the guests on behalf of the second son of the Loye family, opening the door to their home. Melnar thanked and noted how polite this young man is. Al only smiled and wanted to leave, but his father suddenly stopped him. The father said that after such a spectacle, the son still does not escape without talking to him. But now he needs to talk to the graph in the window, so he puts the conversation with his son for later. He smiled at Allah and asked him to stay in the garden and not forget to take a wooden sword. Julin, noticing anxiety on the face of Allah, barely held back laughter. 3 men came to the door and tapped carefully, asking for permission to go to the room. When Julina entered the room, the girl near her mother Allah rose sharply from her place, looking at her in surprise. Lenaria finally met her lover and happily rushed to him in arms, so much she was sad. Al was surprised by her appearance. The girl was so small that she added nothing more. The way Yulin raised her into the air and circled her did not resemble the serious and sensible guy who he was in the morning. Allah had no doubt. There was not Viscount Estelle, but Viscount Lawlin. The father of Allah, as if not noticing anything, just spoiled softly. Then the man reminded Lenaria that she had not yet named her name. She lifted her gorgeous dress, worshipped her politely and introduced her name. Her name, Lenaria. She was Viscounta's wife. Lenaria was genuinely happy with the acquaintance with Earl Melnar and Alfred. She approached Ayla and heard he introduced himself to the second son of the Lulalite family, warmly welcoming her in her home. She folded her hands, thanked her hospitality, and looked at Alfred, wanting to become friends with him. Alfred was ashamed and thought that he had already fallen in love with this friendly smile of Julin. Subsequently, Lenaria again thanked the hospitality and especially noted the delicious dishes that Bartolo prepared. Allah's father asked if they tried the spaghetti. Yulina replied that Melnar was delighted. Melnar joked for it that they did not like them. Suddenly, Al felt that someone was looking at him from behind. When he turned, he saw Lenaria, which followed. She smiled and said that she was tired when she was called Mrs. Component placement, so she was asked to turn to her simply, Lenaria. The guy uncertainly called her by name and asked why she followed him. She smiled and said she just wanted to chat a little. She looked at him with an innocent look and asked quietly if he did not deny. Al did not dare to refuse, although he warned immediately. His room is very small, and there is nothing special there. But Lenaria still agreed and looked as if it really had been waiting for it. But the closer the girl was approaching, the more the alarm covered the boy. He returned steeply, and Lenaria felt anxiety. It seemed as if something had happened. Al was convinced that something was approaching his head. But he decided that he just seemed, and did not pay attention to it. He realized that he became very wary after a sister of Lenaria, who often imperceptibly sneaked from his back. The atmosphere became tense again. Now there were only 2 in the room, so the guy understood. It was she who causes his excitement. To see, Al changed the pace and began to go faster. Lenaria lagged behind, staying beyond, and it reassured him a little. He was quietly swaying. All this began to annoy him. Finally, they got to their room. But as soon as he returned, Lenaria suddenly stroked him on his head. They both froze from surprise for a moment. The girl smiled slightly, as if she wanted to say that she just stroked. But when she saw how he reacted, she stopped immediately. She was discovering her cheeks blushed, and she began to apologize. It seemed to her that the guy was nice. Al could not say that he did not like it, but this act knocked him out of the panther. Lenaria was pleased that the guy knew such a complex word as puzzles, and immediately baptized him with his wise man. She confessed a little aware that she simply considers him very sweet, and could not resist him from the desire to stroke him. And then Al finally, he realized why he constantly felt this strange intention on her part. It turned out that Lenaria just loves children. She is the youngest among her sisters, and had long dreamed of a younger brother. Al well realized what she was feeling. In his past life in Japan, he had 3 sisters. Too many, in his opinion. Being the youngest in the family, he never understood what they wanted from him. Often he felt a simple toy in their hands. Even now, nothing has changed. If Allah had a younger brother, he could at least a little to defend himself from the perseverance of the sisters, especially Lenaria. Almost sighed with this thought. Lenaria confessed that he would like a younger brother too. Lenaria immediately blossomed with joy. It meant that he did not deny being her baby. The guy froze with surprise, trying to understand that she had just said she said again with joy. Let him become her baby. Again, he tried to understand this strange suggestion she made. It sounded too sharply. He just mentioned his younger brother, and she had already talked about the children. It may be better if they had a baby with Falcon. Lenaria was confused and looked away. She became awkward to discuss children with the Esthel. Al did not understand this, because they seemed to be married. Suddenly, the cold blew in the hallway, and Al decided to return to the room. Lenaria, without hesitation, supported his decision. When he entered the room, he decided to heat it a little. The girl was viewed around and apologized, because she did not notice a fireplace here. She confessed that she was able to use only the magic of the wind, and asked if there were any secrets of its use. Al advised to use magic at the right time when it would be most effective. For example, you can knock down a branch from a tree or drop fresh air into the room. Al believed that the use of household magic was a great way to train. Lenaria was confused because she was referring to something completely different. The guy looked at her in surprise. It was about fighting magic, similar to a guilty cut. Al has not yet used medium-level magic in practice, but already realized what its essence. The problem was that such magic was very dangerous, and Al almost never left his native village. However, even simple household magic could be a powerful weapon if you know how to use it properly. Lenaria was genuinely admired by his idea, and Alina, when he heard that she had addressed him by his name. In this world, almost no one used magic in daily affairs. But if people started doing it, their lives would become much easier. In addition, such magic could be a protection against dangers. For him, the main threat was always his older sister, so he had to learn to stand up for himself. Lenaria approached the table where the reverse game stood. However, after the recent tournament, Al did not even want to look at her. Lenaria gladly shared the news that this game had already reached the capital itself. Al did not hide his astonishment. It seems that the merchant he allowed to put the game for sale has quickly sold all the product. For some reason, it caused him a slight annoyance. The girl said her dad purchased a rare copy at the most popular moment. She was terribly happy when he agreed to play with her. It was then that Al realized that her father was the Duke of Lao. Lenaria has been blushed because she has not yet had time to share this news. It was also a surprise for Allah. The Duke is the highest title among aristocrats, which is provided only for their outstanding merits. Suddenly, his sister's voice was heard behind. Alina asked why Al did not listen to her father's words. Al did not pay attention to her words and recalled that at first it was necessary to knock. Alina replied that she was knocking, especially because they were now guests. Lenaria was also surprised as Alina suddenly appeared. But even if she knocked, it was still unhappy without permission. In addition, Lenaria did not even notice how she entered. Al looked at the confused Ladarium and thought that she apparently had some attitude towards the royal family. But Lenaria denied, and Al exhausted with relief. Al realized, if he said something carelessly by a relative of the monarch, it could turn out for him badly. He was still a simple rural nobleman. Therefore, the guy decided to ask another question. He was curious about how she married Victory. Alina was also looking forward to the answer. Lenaria Zamari was agitated, and her cheeks flooded with a blush. She was embarrassed, and did not know what to say. Finally, clasping her hands to the light cheeks, she confessed. She fell in love at first glance. Alina smiled happily, and suggested that they were for the first time that they had seen with Window. She sighed, thinking that rumors of love were always similar wherever you are. Lenaria said it happened 7 years ago. Al grabbed his head. It turns out that Yulin, Vicomte, was guilty of everything. Al could not believe that Lenarius was only 16 this year. She looked even younger. When he looked at everything on the other, he realized she fell in love with him for 9 years. Falling in love at first sight at this age is unusual. Alina apologized and asked how they managed to get married. Al lifted his finger up and said, "A good question, sister." Initially, Lenaria's father was against their marriage, but later gave his consent. Alina asked, did she try to achieve this for 7 years? Al enthusiastically looked at the girl. She was not at all like a selfish. He wanted to give her proper respect from all her heart. In the eyes of Alina, a shine appeared. For her it was a real fabulous story about the love of people from different worlds. Lenaria, though a little embarrassed, with pleasure continued the story, but only sadly shook his head. He was sure that his sister would not be able to achieve such. She lacked women's attractiveness. But Alina calmly replied that with femininity, she had a full order. However, Al saw it perfectly. She did not understand him at all. He believed that the true power of a woman was the ability to show their uniqueness and radiate light from the inside. Apparently, her sister thought that she was talking about fists or swords. This was confirmed when she hit him on her head. Al shouted and asked why it happened. Alina just smiled and said that some voice in her head told her to do so. Al heavily sighed and thought that she had a strange seer. Lenaria laughed, assuring that they had all well. But Al felt the appearance is misleading and their relationship is not the same as it seems. Julin entered the room and reminded Lenaria that time to go. She shouted the Estel, and Al immediately she was alert. But the girl just smiled. They say, "Everything is fine." Yulin looked with suspicion, but the girl gently pushed him to the door. When they came out, she asked Allah if he really had such a good relationship with her sister. The guy lay in bed and did not want to climb. It was cold outside, but under his favorite winter blanket was cozy and warm. Although he had magic, nothing could be compared to the enchantments of warm futon. He exclaimed happily that he would not leave him. Al closed his eyes and imagined that he was in a warm sky, wrapping himself with a sense of true happiness. Lying on his side, he felt the comfort of the pillow and the softness of the blanket, enjoying these little joys at the same time. Suddenly the desire to go to the toilet came. But how to leave this cozy nest? I only choose. The cold will immediately fall in everywhere. He was faced with a choice: to retreat and surrender or stay and fight until the end, keeping the warmth. It was one of the most difficult trials that every character passes. Al, with all his strength, he kept a blanket. Outside it was spread, and the bright light of the morning cut his eyes. I opened my eyes, and the hike to the toilet seemed incredibly complicated. He tried to pull his leg, but the cold immediately forced him to hide her back. But he still managed to return to futon and dive into the heat again. However, his desire was increasing, and he was already on the verge. The pride was rising inside. Something is ready to break it. He finally got up, and holding the trees from the cold, hugged himself with his hands. He wanted to be teleported to the toilet, but decided to stay under the warm futon a little. Stretching the sweater, I rushed to the toilet. Suddenly he woke up with a cry. All this turned out to be sleep. Birds sang outside the window. The dream was so realistic that it seemed like everything was really going on. Meanwhile, the second day of the festival has come outside. The cool air around everything explained. But it was something unexpected that made him suddenly wake up. He stood sharply, looked under the blanket, not believing his eyes. But no, the sheet was dry. He sighed with relief. His dignity remained intact. He calmed down, again settled in a warm bed, and decided to take a little nap. But suddenly someone knocked on the door. Silvio wondered if AL was no longer sleeping. Hearing this, AL responded that he was still sleeping. Silvio just smiled because he didn't even have time to say anything. Al wanted to tell something about olives, but suddenly shouted sharply that he did not want to listen, and asked to leave him alone. Silvio was confused, but still decided to do how he asked Al. Alina knocked on the door quietly and guessed that he was no longer asleep. His voice came to her when he talked to Silvio. Al even regretted that he shared with his brother. Alina wanted to enter immediately, and the guy felt she was too hurried. The sister went to the room, walked to the bed and waved her hand, making it clear that he had to get up. Al portrayed the sweetest smile, closed his eyes, and pretended to be asleep. Now, where Alina looked, he will only see her sweet, sleepy brother everywhere. That's how he imagined. Alina touched her hand to his face. Al loudly moaned with pain. He already wanted to ask his sister to remove his hand from his head, but she didn't think to hurry. After all, today is only the second day of the festival. Is it really worth getting up so early? Al reported that Count Melnar, along with Viscount Loli, also want to relax. Alina immediately corrected him, noting that the name of Viscount Julin, and also reminded that Al was risked like a thin ice. Al wondered that it was more dangerous, to step on a thin ice or to risk to touch what Alina considers her special limit, namely, her breasts. Suddenly her sister pulled him by her hair, as if he guessed what he was thinking about. He exclaimed in surprise that he did not say anything. Alina just smiled and replied that women's intuition told her to do so, and she joked that it was a real intuition of the sediment. The sister reminded that there is now a morning training. Al stretched and said he had not heard about it from his father, but it turned out that the father has just made such a decision. Today, training with Count Melnar and Roomba. Al was not at all rejoiced in the return of Roomba. Why did he come today? Al wanted to just calmly finish the game and go to bed. But Alina said that Count and Roomba themselves invited him. He had to the end that he would be able to hide behind his brother Silvio. But suddenly he heard someone's voice and turned his gaze on the door. Alina said that if he were Silvio in place, he would not withstand because his protection was too weak. Al agreed. Silvio is not suitable for the role of the shield. When everything became clear, Alina hoped that he would join them. Al is reluctant to get out of bed. If the Graf himself called, you will do nothing. Pressing his hand to his forehead, he hoped that his sister would not have a trace of his sister. After a while, Alina reappeared at the door to make sure he finally gathered. There she saw Silvio, who sat with his back to everyone and looked into the wall. She asked him why he was here, because it's time to go to workout. But at first she decided to feed Ayla. After all, without a good breakfast will not work well. However, in the morning, the guy does not want to eat at all. To live quietly and enjoy every day, you need to take care of yourself and keep your body in tone. Al went to the kitchen and greeted his mother. Alina smiled and nodded. Good morning. Alina smiled and a little sarcastically noted that children are too energetic today. Al did not understand why she said it. I looked at my mom and asked, "What is there on my forehead?" Alina looked surprised. She was unclear what I was talking about. It seemed to me that instead of my forehead, a pumpkin had grown, and something was painted on it. Mom laughed and assured that everything was fine with him. His forehead looks as always. Al did not understand why she laughs. He didn't like it. She laughs again. At that moment, a maid, Sarah, came to the kitchen, carrying breakfast. Al immediately thought that she could rely on. She is as attentive as his mom. She does not look like him at all. He thanked, and Sarah smiled in response. But looking at him, she suddenly laughed quietly. Al noticed her laughter and said it aloud. The girl quickly covered her mouth with her hand. During his breakfast, he turned to his mother, asking if Sarah's sneezing was connected with what was happening. If the mom does not say anything, then he will turn to Sarah herself. Mom was no longer nearby, as if she was suddenly taken away. Al decided not to worry and get his delicious dish, because delicious food always helps you feel better. He managed to fill his mouth with juicy vegetables, the taste of which was felt up to the bones. Suddenly, laughter came from the next room, and he almost dropped the fork from surprise. The stranger did not stay and directly asked what it was on his forehead. Al hit his hand on the table and asked her mom what was happening. Mom was almost laughing, but she restrained and agreed with him. It was necessary to keep seriousness. Alina laughed and said that the trail on the forehead looks funny. She became tremided that Al could be offended by her, but immediately thought it was guilty and quickly ran to her room. He was just shocked how his sister was holding him. It seemed that only a demon, not a man, could have such power. Probably, she is a real queen of demons. Almet. What if instead of laughing, everyone was honestly told him the truth? He decided that it was time to train for real, and vowed to be a loyal sister for the rest of his life. But first it was necessary to eat breakfast. Holding a knife and a fork, he courageously asked the demonic king to wait a little. He attacked food at such a speed, as if lightning flashed on the table. Alina, along with the maid, approached him to ask. They were ashamed that they laughed at him. Al proudly got up from the table, thanked for a delicious lunch and said goodbye to everyone. Alina, trying not to laugh, reminded him of the future workout. Mina finally managed to collect her thoughts. She exclaimed that she had almost come down from Alfred's cheek. Alfred, leaving the room, said he was not angry at all. Sarah heard it and quietly hid behind the door. On the training field, Alina met him that he was late again, apparently. For all time he did what he ate. Al, in response, he said in an annoyance that he had come to deal with her and turn into pieces. The sister looked at him so that she was cold from her gaze, but she did not understand what he had just said. Al is cleverly evaded, and Alina, as if nothing had happened, then engaged in a warm-up. In the meantime, Silvio approached and apologized to being delayed. Al was angry with himself. He was unfortunate that he was frightened by Alina's gaze. I felt like a beast that was stuck. Even if I had a strong will, now I would not have the strength to protect myself. He remembered how once the girls asked Eugene to run after a snack. Alina told her brother so that he did not speak nonsense in the morning, but better. The upset Al only nodded silently. Today, Al did not want to fight with a Roomba because he was clearly not one of those who know how to restrain himself. One sharp movement, and Al can be in the air. Melnar proposed to stand in his place. However, Al immediately he saw in him a real warrior, the same as his father. It was clear even without words. There was only one look. Melnar said that he is training his baby now, so there is nothing to worry about. It surprised Allah. He did not know that Melnar had a baby. Al proposed to move the duel to later, because when children are near, you should be careful. But the Roomba did not retreat. He also sought to fight with Red. The graph recalled how the Roomba broke the wooden sword, to which the Roomba noted that the Count himself once did the same. Al could not believe his ears. Did Melnar really hesitate? The tension between the graph and the adventurer only increased until Alina was finally asked to calm down and disperse. Al tiredly looked at Silvio. Today in that energy, though, take away. He was always serious, and today a cold shine appeared in his eyes. The enemy to be overcome is to blame, and this enemy was the sister of Alina. Silvio also faced the same problem. Al thought that with his brother, if you stay confident, they would be able to resist her. The demon clenched his fist and quietly told the queen, "Wait. Today everything will be different." At that moment their father called all together. It was time to sparring. Al grabbed his head. It cannot be. To fight the demonic king, you need a whole team: hero, magician, cleric, and someone else. Alina cast a cold look and confidently stated that she liked everything. Silvio looked at his younger brother, and he also smiled mysteriously. Al nervously swore. He became strange that his brother smiled just like Alina. The first to the arena came from Silvio and Al. Al suspected that his sister wanted them to spend their strength, and then planned to meet him in battle. He barely resisted not to express his guesses aloud. Melnar recalled how Ala, with the help of ice magic, cooled them juice with the help of magic. This ability is very rare. Also, Al was able to create a storage facility from the ground. The Roomba agreed with this and added that Almi was able to even create huge icicles. Silvio waved his sword silently, but fortunately, Al had time to react quickly. At the last moment, he was able to restrain his brother. The power of that was so powerful that it was a surprise. Al noted that Silvio's battle technique suddenly became completely different. Now there was a completely different opponent in front of him. If they started counting the number of blows, El would only fall behind a few steps. He smiled his brother, noticing that today is more incendiary than usual. Silvio flicked and clenched his teeth firmly, because he remembered how Al recently reproached him for bad protection. Al barely managed to defend himself against powerful blows and could not understand why his brother looked so upset. Silvio quickly came closer. His sword flew completely next to Al's face, but Al managed to deflect at the last moment. Al hoped that Silvio would appreciate it, because it was thanks to his sister's caring that he learned to skillfully avoid attack. Alina thought that there was a personal conflict between the brothers, but the Roomba just smiled cunningly and assured her that it was not true. Al Steele looked in their direction, but the annoyed Silvio sharply waved his sword and strictly ordered him not to be distracted. Al Millie realized that the first blow was just a deception. He could barely bounce when a new blow was flying on him. They froze in place, carefully examining the enemy. This time the duel was more complicated than all the previous ones. Al seemed exhausted, and Silvio was already going to take this opportunity, but his father suddenly stopped the fight. Silvio was angry. No blow was able to reach the goal, but his father reassured him and said that this time the main thing was not to win, but to show his strength. Al exhaled with relief and dropped to the ground, realizing that he was already on the verge of his strength. Silvio smiled, mentally deciding that next time he would definitely strike. Al thought that Dad noticed which brother was annoyed today. But Dad just smiled, they say. This is your older brother. It seems he just didn't want to give preference to the younger. The hero made the decision. As it was with Chagami, he will ahead of him at the most important moment. Silvio was a real workaholic, so it is quite possible. But Al has increasingly trusted magic than the skill of owning a sword. Therefore, Dad warned, magic cannot be used during the battle. But Al still asked to allow at least a little. Quite weak. But his father refused and reminded him that it was important to realize the purpose of training. Al reluctantly agreed. The father announced that the next match would take place between Alina and Alo. At first he could not believe heard and froze in fear. He could not understand why this time he should fight again. Not his brother. Alina just smiled back. The father added that he seems as if he had a lot of strength. Everyone has already entered the battle, and only Al stayed away. Suddenly he clasped his head with his hands and shouted. When Alina saw him react, her smile became even wider. She gladly rushed to her brother, the moment of start. Al, with excitement, he looked around, looking for Silvio. I was already going to say something to my brother, but he just smiled and made it clear that it was necessary to make every effort. Al could not look away from his sister. and with every second he was covered by more fear. He has a desire to ask her at least a little mercy. This resembled a real hero's duel with an evil demon king. The real battle began. The hero Alfred opposes the demon. At the signal of their father, they were allowed to start a duel. The duel barely had time to begin, as everything was already resolved by one strong blow. The father stopped them simply by raising his hand. Al lay on the ground, feeling the pain of blows. He acknowledged that it was too cruel. After all, his father said that it was not necessary to resort to beating. Alina said he was too weak. Al began to justify himself, they say. He left all his forces in the previous battle. However, the sister did not believe that it would really have some importance. Earl Melnar turned to his father, asking for a minute to talk. Al only managed to wipe the dirt from his face and come to his senses a little, as he heard another call from his father. Meanwhile, Alina, pleased with herself, was leisurely drunk from a glass. Even after a long workout, it remained calm and fresh. Silvio just smiled, because he knew perfectly. Her sister never could bury her true emotions. The hero grabbed the sword even stronger and suddenly realized what his disadvantage was. The Earl saw it and noted with a smile that the guy finally realized everything. Usually for a real fan of fighting, Earl even trained his child. Now that it is time to test the acquired skills in real conditions, he called the Roomba. Roomba waved his hand sharply, impatiently calling for a duel. Al carefully pressed the sword to his chest and sincerely asked him to stop. To the surprise of everyone, he managed to beat this blow. Although the hands trembled, the moaning bell of the swords made the heart shrink against fear. And the Roomba, meanwhile, just smiled. The protective rack has already been broken. He opened his eyes and saw the Roomba rush to him again. He could not stand and shouted from the fright, deciding that this time the Roomba would definitely kill him. Over time, Al gradually began to get used to the rhythm of battle. Melnar did not think that with such abilities, Al would be able to become the best, but still noticed in him the real spirit of the adventure seeker. In the morning, on the final day of the festival, deep sighs came from the Ala room. Almost all day he was in bed. Bartolo came to him to say hello. The guy had an exhausted look. Bartolo also recalled that the holiday is already coming to an end and soon all the guests will be eaten. Count Nelmar shook his hand to Ala's father and invited them to visit. The father promised that the next time they came to the capital, be sure to visit him. Before leaving, Count recalled that Al already reached the age when we should attend the nobles. But despite this, it is likely that they will see much earlier. Molin sincerely thanked for the warm reception and invited everyone to visit her native land. Ala's father gladly agreed and assured that Al would also go with them. The hero hoped that it was only courtesy, because Lenaria seemed too joyful. Looking after them, he barely smiled. The idea of getting to the nobles seemed very seductive. I wish there were kind people there. Silvio looked around with delight. There was a real fabulous atmosphere. But despite this, his brother planned to stay in his room with a book all day. Al was surprised that his brother was so fond of books. But Silvio believed that it was through books that man can see other worlds and change his attitude to life. Now the hero began to understand him. Own experience, of course, is very important, but other people's stories can be valuable. Al asked his brother what book he reads now. The brother replied, Sea Princess and Three Dragons. Al smiled and confessed that he had recently read this story. Silvio was surprised, but asked not to tell the details forward. Al noted that when it came to books, his brother glowed directly with joy. He wondered that the parental traits in his sister manifested more. But if you look closely, it was possible to see that a lot of things in Silvio and his father. Silvio noted that Ala was resorted to his mother, as cunning and unpredictable as she. He also stressed that at least Ala was not so angry. At this point, their mother suddenly appeared. Al was lost. It seems that it was no easier than her. The older brother led him forward and said that people had already gathered. Al noticed that today there are many more people here because today is a banquet. The father does not deny. The holiday for him is delicious food, drinks, fun songs and dances around the campfire. This time everyone is engaged in the Laulathi family. The food is free and everything is just organized great. This year, the festive banquet was much more luxurious, as the trade company Tri joined the event support. Al, with fear, he realized that all these changes took place through the sales of the reverse game. Even his clothes became much more expensive. He thought that this trick was definitely earning huge profits. Because of this merchant and Silvio from Bartolo, there were many troubles. Silvio did not tell all the details, but asked his brother not to merge on this holiday. Al nodded and agreed, In fact, it is better to rejoice now rather than to be angry. He shook his brother's hand and thanked him for the feeling of calm he gave. In response, Silvio just smiled. Al deep he felt as he had dried up in his mouth. Silvio nodded towards a trolley with cool fruit water. It is time to freshen up. While Al and Silvio was slowly stepping on the street, two mysterious shadows were quietly monitored from the houses. Al looks, continuing to chew something delicious, and thinks that he probably lost his brother again. Behind it can be heard as girls are talking briskly about a cute blonde who walked next to a low guy with chestnut hair. Al immediately he understands that it is about them with his brother. One of the girls remembers her husband, but the other impatiently interrupts her. First, you should find that beautiful guy, and you can forget about a man for a moment. Al realized that these girls were among those who watched Western's battle with Roland. It looked good that they remembered the participants of the duel. Instead of wasting time in search, it is better to turn to women's gossiping channels. They will find out everything right away. The hero silently says goodbye to them, waving his hand. Al decided not to pay attention to anything and just moved forward. If it were Silvio, he would probably call it indifference. One girl remembered that Nora noticed them from the east side, so the whole company decided to go there. The girls, cheerfully knocking their feet, are in a hurry, and Al with a frightened face rushes in a completely different way. In the crowd, Al suddenly hears a voice that advises him to move west. He decides to trust and go in that direction. On the way, the elder welcomes him and asks how the holiday went. Al smiles in response. Everything was great, the food is delicious, and people are fun. Squeezing through humans, he immediately notices two healthy men with giant biceps. Wester stands in front of Alo. Almith immediately realizes that he now has another match, this time between Roland and Wester. The crowd looks at their muscles. One of the men will even swear to put a coin on Roland. His biceps make a strong impression. Some even want to feel such a giant. One of those who watches is a very much look at a neighbor who looks at the stage enthusiastically. The pond is a silver coin. Al mentioned how the same happened at the Reversi Tournament. Apparently, the locals really enjoy all the large scale. There is little entertainment in the village, so such events are always admirable. Wester and Roland squeeze their hands into their fists and prepare for the fight. Girls just can't look. Sweat, tense muscles, hot breath is quite close. But it's not news, it only sighs. The boys decided that it was really important to them. Al Crivo smiled, thinking that sometimes it is better not to know everything in this world. Finally, the judge gives a sign, and two giants with an evil cry rush to each other. Al understands that there are already agreements between the girls for a long time, but the guys know nothing about these rules. Without stopping, he moves forward. In the crowd, his gaze stops on a familiar blue hair. The hero opened his eyes wide. His sister Emma stood in front of him. One girl from the village was greeted with him, but he was so hurried to Emma that he almost drew up and threw on the course. "Let's talk then." Al looks out of the house and calls his sister. But when he sees her, his smile disappears, and an expression of true horror appears on his face. It seems next to her was another guy. Al just couldn't believe his eyes. The guy cast his gaze on Ayla and then turned to Emma. Al was surprised and thought about himself. How can he so boldly behave immediately when dating? Emma asked the Torah to behave calmly because they were in front of them. Lord's second son, Alfred. Thor was a little confused because he did not expect that such an important person looked so everyday and even a little senseless. Now, Ael realized who before him was his younger brother, but he behaved very strange. Thor grunted dissatisfied that he was indifferent, whose son is here. If someone does not like it, then it is his business. Emma firmly grabbed him for his cheek, and Thor began to whistle, begging her to stop. Emma's younger brother named Thor approached Alla, apologized, said that he was 8 years old, and called his name. Al smiled, shook his hand, introduced himself as Alfred, and said that he was 6. He also had an older brother and sister. Hearing this, Thor immediately realized who was talking about. The guy suddenly took Alla by his hand and took to the side, asking for a while to go with him. At first, he could not understand anything, but still agreed. When they were left alone, Thor strongly pressed Alla to the wall, sharply put his palm near his face and froze, filled with indecision. He wanted to discuss something important, but did not find words for start. Al thought that Thor was just mocking him. Thor's cheeks broke out. He muttered something quietly, and then Al asked him to say it louder. Thor wanted to find out if Leonore meets with someone. Hearing this, Alla got sick in her heart, but he couldn't let this guy come to Leonora. I decided in a solid tone, It is time to tell the whole truth. When Thor thought about her, his eyes were suddenly shone. For him, she was extremely sweet. Only he shook his head, deciding that Thor was saying nonsense. However, Thor advised to look at the situation from the outside. Perhaps, then Al will see everything differently. Al tried to explain that the appearance of Leonora could easily deceive. He was unclear why Thor decided that she was a good man. He sincerely confessed that his sister was not like Emma at all. Its true opposite. Thor in response noted that he never saw his sister truly angry. Barely turning his breath, Al said that Leonor is very incendiary and harsh. Thor joked for this that Emma is also not perfect. She is constantly inattentive and does not follow. In addition, she once put cotton wool in her bra. But suddenly, women's voices intervened in their dispute. The girls wanted to find out what was talking about. The boys from Surprise froze. Before them stood a tired Silvio, and there were Leonor and Emma nearby. Silvio waved his brother's hand, and Al explained that he was looking for him. The hero was already ready to escape. But Leonor suddenly grabbed him by the collar and asked where he gathered. Al made immediately, he remembered how she resembles her father at such moments. Emma smiled, but in her eyes there was still determination. She quickly brought to the Torah, apparently, and she listened to their conversation about women's breasts. Leonor said goodbye to Emma, waving her hand. They needed to go in their business. Emma also left a friendly swing. At this time, one of the locals drew attention to the children of the feudal lord. They looked like a real model of the perfect family. Their sister-brother and his sister were getting along as if the best friends. The woman sighed with mild sadness, because her own children are constantly arguing. Al wanted to point out that everything is not as it seems from the outside. He realized that he had started this conversation in vain. There was nowhere to go. The village of Kolyat had a bright future ahead, but he probably not. At the last festival, an unusual story happened to him. They talked about the sisters with Thor, without even realizing that they were waiting for them. The boys and Noise did not have that their sisters were near and heard every word. They were immediately sent home, but the worst was just approaching. On that day, the loud exclamations of Allah were heard throughout the house. Leonor chose the most severe punishment. She began to tickle him. Mom just smiled, looking at the children find a common language well. Even the maids could not restrain laughter because of their cheerful noise. In the end, Leonor released her brother and quickly went somewhere. For Ayla, it became a real disaster. He came to where the big crowd had already gathered. The banquet was in full swing. The hero was glad because it just started. Suddenly he noticed the Torah, who exclaimed that the hero was already late, but finally smiled. Thor remained alive. However, the guy immediately seriously, their friend was barely able to escape. Both immediately began to look for their sisters. Al thought that if Emma met, then Leonor, most likely, would be with her, because girls usually do not part. Thor agreed with this idea, so they decided to go out in the evening. Thor was still offered to drink something strong. Al reminded that they are still children. He was surprised why Thor considers them friends, but Thor explained, if you have already told each other whom they love, then it is a real friendship. Al thought and finally agreed with him. The Vala first had a friend of the same age as himself. The feelings he had to Emma were not at all like love. It was more sincere admiration. He cast his gaze towards the Torah, which literally glowed with joy, because he finally found the one who could be talking to. After a brief conversation, Al thought that he was too bothered by others. Thor reminded that he never said if he had a guy's younger sister. Al immediately he remembered, and replied that she had no one at this time, although there were once rumors about the fan. Hearing this, Thor was so excited that he grabbed him by his shoulders. Thor grabbed him and began to shake him, but Al calmly asked him to calm down, they say. Such a conversation would not help. Then Thor stopped and apologized. Al heavily sighed. All this happened 2 years ago. At one of the points, the young nobleman saw Leonor and fell in love with her immediately. Thor asked about the details, but he knew a little. Even before the guy had time to say something, Leonor had already grabbed his sword and aimed at him. After that, she stopped inviting points, and talking about marriage with her disappeared. She often said that he would never be next to those who are weaker than her. Leonor was too strong, and Thor understood. He had no chance. And he did not believe that someone in the world was able to overcome his sister. According to Shiel, Sharia, and Charles, but they are all girls. Suddenly a real capture of girls came around. Roland began to take off his clothes. Wester also did not slow down and joined him. Thor was surprised that adults were so noisy today, and Al just smiled and said that they were always behaving in a similar way. The hero has long noticed the world of adults is not at all like children. Thor also understood it well and fully agreed with him. Thor was silent, and then gathered with the spirit and said loudly that he would try even more. That evening he firmly decided he would surely be stronger than Leonore. He may not reach such a level of skill in fencing as she, but will never seem. It was his principle. He sought to become those who could stand next to the best. Al smiled, looking at the serious face of the Torah. If we take the example of the strongest, then the only way is to become an adventure. Since the festival ended, the whole week has passed. Al looked out the window. The cold prevailed in the yard. On these days, it is best to stay in bed with an interesting book. Thanks to his ability to control fire magic, in the room was warm and very cozy. When spring came, he decided to go outside more often, to lie down in the open and read books. As soon as he felt hungry, he got food from the refrigerator with the help of magic of air. His new way of life was reminiscent of a true fairy tale. Suddenly, a voice sounded that Allah was playing. Suddenly, the hero spilled tea and fell on the bed. Someone's voice came from the street. Al Wag, who does not hear him. He dreamed of being a little while in silence and peace. He rarely remained alone because Thor was constantly looking for him and called to return. Al annoyed the window. Thor exclaimed that he had to say something. Thor has explained that adventurers are people who make a living, performing different tasks. They hunt monsters, accompany important persons in travel, and perform other dangerous assignments. She also collects rare materials and medicinal herbs, and examines forests, studies plants and other unusual things. He invited Allah to go together, but Al immediately he refused because he dreamed of staying in the village and living quietly. Thor only sighed hard. He already knew that it would be. He noticed that his sister Emma was now at home. Therefore, Al immediately jumped and asked for another minute to do something. The house suddenly came. Just a few minutes passed, as the hero ran out and asked Emma to wait a little. He just left the room as he heard a strange noise in the Leonora room. He carefully opened the door to find out what happened there. Al did not immediately realize what happened. His sister was already lying on the floor.